Like
Same
pit stop,
everything?
kind of like the Lucas and
Okay.
AEDs and setting that all up on Thursday. So we're gonna have a team sport.
Oh. Is Ron coming?
I'd like to call the Town of Rocky Hill Planning and Zoning Commission regular meeting of Wednesday, April 19th, 2023 to order. Item 1, public hearing. Item 1A.
Special permit site plan application for Jun Zhang, proposing a commercial amusement entertainment center, trampoline park, and foam pits for property located at 30 Water Chase Drive, the former Porter and Chester Institute, in a RC Regional Commercial Zoning District ID 04-348.
Nobody can hear you. You got to talk into the,
Okay.
it's been on.
Do we have a applicant for presentation? Yeah.
We're doing it, all of us are sitting, right?
Yes. Yeah,
Make
so
sure.
for,
Talk into the microphone. People
Yeah,
can't
I
hear
think
you.
it's-
It's on.
what's on? Okay, let me see. So all the sitting commissioners are seated?
Oh, you guys.
Good.
Yeah. Well, one question. I was told to bring the all the mail outs.
You can just.
You
hand
can
them-
just hand over, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Hi, thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Yeah, someday I'm gonna get to be up there.
Hi. Okay. Hi, my name is Jun Zhang. I'm here to seek the special use permit for the trampoline park that we're going to be putting in. Yes. Does anyone have any questions?
I think, do you have the special permit application of all the points that you can go through?
Is that?
Have, let me give you my
I'm
copy.
sorry.
I'm going to give you my copy. But I had some questions, so you may want to those as well.
Here, do you wanna give him my copy?
Oh, I didn't.
Oh. Okay. So let me see. So I guess like the hours of operations and things like that. Is that what we want to go through?
Yeah, you can just go through that list.
And the special permit criteria, which are on the pages that you responded to in red.
Okay. So sorry, this is one of my first times doing this.
No, that's fine, just start reading from special permit criteria A and just go through.
Okay. So the location and size of this. Okay, I just need the red, right? Just want me to read the red. Okay.
No, read one as well, like.
Okay.
Yeah.
The location and size of the site and the nature and the intensity of the operations involved were conducted in the connection with the use and the location of the site with respect to streets and given access to as such that the use shall be in harmony with the appropriate and orderly development in the district in which it is located and shall be promote the welfare of the town. The location is on 30 Water Chase Drive in Rocky Hill, Connecticut. Our brand is called Fun City Adventure Park. We are a family-oriented entertainment center that includes trampolines, arcades, rope courses, playgrounds, kids rock climbing, ninja courses, foam pits, battle beans, and more things along that nature. The design hasn't been 100% designed. 2, the proposed use shall be used in such a location and size that the character in general which it will be in harmony with the appropriate and orderly development of the district in which it is proposed to be situated and shall not tend to depreciate the value of the property in the neighborhood and shall not be detrimental to the orderly development of the adjacent properties in accordance with the zoning classifications of such properties. I'm not sure about the size of the entire parcel. However, the size of the space that we are utilizing is about 57,000 square feet, which will include all entertainment zones stated above. B, appropriate improvements. The design elements of the proposed development will be attractive and suitable in relation to site characteristics, the style of our building in the immediate area, and the existing and probable future character of the neighborhood which is used. I think that kind of information is not available. We're located inside of a strip mall on Water Chase. The location and nature of the height of the buildings, fences, planned activities, and nature of the extent on the landscaping on the site will be that such that shall not hinder or discourage the appropriate development and use of adjacent land or buildings, impair the value thereof. Again, we're inside of a strip mall, so I don't know if this applies to us. The proposed use or activity shall have no adverse effect on the neighborhood area resulting in the use of signs, exposed artificial lights, colored lights of any nature, flashing lights, loudspeakers, or any noise-making device. We're located inside of an existing building. I don't think that applies. In the case where the proposed is to convert a structure, design, and build originally for the other use, and the structure is adaptable to the proposed use from the point of view of the health and public safety. We are located in a strip mall. The design and location of the specific details of the proposed use or activity shall not adversely affect safety in the streets nor increase traffic congestion in the area, nor interfere with the pattern of vehicular circulation in such a manner as to create or augment unsafe traffic conditions. Our business shouldn't promote an effect on the pattern of traffic. Parking areas or areas will be adequate size for the particular use and shall be suitably screened from adjoining residential uses, and entrances and exit drives will be laid out as to prevent traffic hazards and nuances. There is definitely adequate parking within the where we want to be within the plaza, so this should not cause any issues. Streets and other rights of way shall be in such condition and capacity in terms of the width, grade, alignment, and visibility to adequately accommodate the traffic generated by the particular use. Yes, again, this should not be an issue. Okay, special permit criteria D. Adequate public utilities and services. The provisions of water supply, sewage disposal, and storm drainage conform with engineering practice, comply with all standards and appropriate regulations and authority, and shall not unduly burden the capacity of the facility. That is, yes, we won't do that. The proposed use or activity shall provide easy accessibility for fire apparatus and police protection, and is laid out and equipped to further provision the emergency services. Yes. Environmental protection and conservation. Appropriate consideration shall be given to the protection and preservation or enhancement of natural resources and unique resources, including where appropriate, the use of conservation and restrictions to protect and permanently preserve such resources and features. It's an existing building. I don't think this applies to us. Appropriate consideration shall be given to protection, preservation, or enhancement of historical and archaeological resources, including where appropriate, the use of conservation restrictions to protect and permanently preserve such resource. If this is applicable to us, we would use as much effort as we can to preserve the historical and archaeological resources of said property. Appropriate consideration shall be given to protection, preservation, or enhancement of scenic resources, including where appropriate, the use of conservation and restrictions to protect and permanently preserve such resources and features. Again, if it is applicable to us, we will use as much effort as we can to make sure this stuff gets preserved. Long-term viability. Adequate provision shall be made for the sustained maintenance of proposed development structures, streets, and other improvements. Not sure if this applies to us because we're an existing building. Consistency with overall objectives. The proposed use or activities does not conflict with the purpose of regulations as amended. No, I don't think our proposed use conflicts with regulations. And the proposed use or activity does not conflict with achievement of goals, objectives, policies, and recommendations of the plan and conservation and development as amended. I believe our proposed use would be a great addition to the city for more family and community activity. The proposed use or activity adequately addresses health and safety or welfare of the public in general and immediate neighborhood in particular. Yes, we should do that. Anything else?
Right, so you're done, okay. Anyone in the public who like to address the commission on this proposal? Anyone in the public who like to address on this proposal? Seeing none, I'll start with the commissioners. Commissioner Zarelli?
I have no questions.
Commissioner Blackout?
Yeah, did you mention hours of operation?
Yeah, that was one of the things I was going to mention. So in the summer, it's going to be a little bit slower, the business. So it'll probably open somewhere around 12 to 1. And in the winter, it'll be from 11 to 11 on weekends. And on weekdays, it'll be 11 to 10.
Okay.
Winter and spring, those are the hours.
Are you going to change the sign? Are you going to have a sign?
The architectural and the engineers are looking into designing of a sign.
Okay.
Commissioner?
I have nothing.
Nothing. Commissioner Robbins?
Yeah, you pretty much asked same questions, and for the hours of operation, what's the maximum number of occupants you might expect in the building at any one time?
So actually, we just got back the research done because we're designing it on how much people can fit. Our architect has said it can fit over 1,000 people, but for safety, I think we might bring it down depending on what we think is adequate based on the design.
And if I may, just for the record, the fire marshal, they typically do have some requirements as far as occupancy load.
Yeah,
For various uses, so.
Yeah, I was thinking more in terms of changes in traffic patterns, only because of the number of folks that, it's a new use.
Right.
If there were 1,000 people there, that would be a lot of vehicles.
No, I don't think.
And
think
that's
we would
not
hit-
gonna-
right hit 1,000.
But more realistically, like, what-
It's probably going to be around. I mean, during very peak hours, I would say around 300 kids ish. So maybe one parent per kid or two parents per kid. So you might get around 600 to 800, I would say. But I think the three of them would also only be one car. So probably around an additional 300 cars during the peak hours. Yeah.
okay, and it's a big parking lot, I know.
Yes. It's more than big enough for it to fit.
Are there that many parking spaces available to you, together with the others?
So the
businesses?
other tenants in the space. So the other part of it is, I think those are actually like more 9 to 5 kind of hours that's currently there, and we're going to be probably later in the night. And the businesses there don't really open on weekends, and our primary business is on weekends.
Do you have another place like this somewhere else?
New Britain has another one. Hamden has another one, but we have 15 locations open.
And you still in the research and development phase of how you're going to do the inside?
Yeah, every sort of park is going to be a little bit different just because of where the poles and how like electrical room and bathrooms and how that's laid out. So the play areas, and this one's a little bit bigger. This one's a huge size. So we're going to try to add more things or make certain things a little bit bigger.
May I ask if you're going to look into ADA accessibility for children in wheelchairs?
Those are all included. So we always have a ramp going up. We have activities that they can do, but of course they can't do every activity, which I can't help because it is a trampoline. They are jumping. Yeah.
Okay. No, I just didn't know if you were going to build that into your specs while you're doing the development.
Of course. Yes. Yep.
Okay. Thanks.
All right. I don't have any questions. Can I have a motion, please?
Motion to close the public hearing.
May I have a second?
Second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Oh, well, you're coming back later, just so you know, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. yeah.
Item 1B.
Special permit site plan application for Great River Holdings, Nick Usello, proposing a mixed-use development, Captain's Walk, approximately 3,584 square feet of non-medical office space and 4 residential units with associated site improvements for property located at 41 Glastonbury Avenue in a R20 zoning district and Glastonbury Avenue overlay district, ID 10-163.
Well, I brought diesel. I don't know if that's, I should have that up on.
Yeah, do you have the stand? Okay.
While Nick is getting the easel, I just want to state for the record that we do have the notifications of abutters. They were dropped off today.
Okay, thanks. Do we, I'm assuming we have a lot of speakers today. Is that for this property? So do we have a sign up we can have?
I did not prepare one, not knowing, so,
Yeah, because otherwise it will,
yeah. I mean, it would be a matter of people lining up or,
Pardon?
you can put in the front, so
well,
so
or
everybody
maybe
can-
on that,
every-
or on that side, well, the audience would need to see it as well. So I'm thinking, because you,
Yeah,
You all have plans, right? That you can kind of.
Yep.
we have to make sure the audience can see it
Yeah.
also, so. I don't have it, but that's,
you can just have regular paper, that's fine. Do you have?
I would rip it out of a notebook. It's all good.
Good.
Okay. All right. So my name is Nick Usello. I actually live in Rocky Hill at 16 Dexter Road. I'm also the owner of Usello Development, which is a custom home building company located at 101 Hammermill Road in Rocky Hill as well. And I'm also the owner of Great River Holdings, which is a real estate holding company that is the applicant for 41 Glastonbury Avenue. Tonight, I'll be giving an overview of the project. We've received feedback from the town engineer, the village district consultant, and some neighbors. Unfortunately, we didn't have time to really get any of the changes formally made to the plans based on that feedback, but it is something we're planning to do, so we wanted to kind of give you a high-level overview tonight, and then move forward with getting those, getting the plans updated and hopefully come back to continue. The goals and objectives of this project for us are basically to try to provide some smaller, high-quality, yet less expensive business and housing options for the residents and business community of Rocky Hill. That's, this type of a use is currently not really available in town. We intend to try to enhance the neighborhood with some high-quality, well-maintained buildings and a pedestrian-friendly development. Of course, we are also looking to comply with the Plan of Conservation and Development's recommendation for creating a mixed-use pedestrian-friendly town center and a connection to the river from the Silas Deane via the Glastonbury Avenue overlay district. The site that we have located at 41 Glastonbury Avenue in Rocky Hill. It's located within the Glastonbury Avenue Village Overlay District. It's on the corner of Glastonbury Ave and Belden Lane and is within walking distance of the Connecticut River, the Silas Deane Highway, the Rocky Hill Town Center, and our municipal complex with the library, post office, town hall, etc. The site is actually unusual in the neighborhood as it has 221 linear feet of frontage along Glastonbury Ave. Most of the lots in the area have narrower frontage and deeper lots. This wide frontage is what allows us to have that multiple building layout that you see there without having them be too crowded on top of one another. Currently, the property contains a 2.5-story residential structure and a detached 2-car garage. Our current plan includes raising the existing home and renovating and updating the 2-car garage, and then building the 3 buildings that you see in this picture. Our original plan was to actually restore the existing house as well and build the other 2 buildings that you see, the larger building to the left of it and the smaller building to the right. we had our structural engineer out to review the property, and based on his findings, between foundation issues, termite damage to the timber frame, and over the years, when you have a historic house like this, if people who own it throughout its existence aren't careful in the way they renovate or update, when they add, at some point plumbing was added to the house, at some point electrical was added to the house, and a heating system, a lot of the timber frame structure has been compromised, through that process over the years, in addition to the termite and foundation damage. The current access to the house is on Glastonbury Ave. We've designed the site to actually enter from Belden Lane. Again, in conjunction with our engineers, it has better sight lines. It's a little wider. It's less traveled than Glastonbury Avenue, so it provides a little bit better egress to the site. It's also our intent to locate the new buildings approximately the same distance from Glastonbury Avenue as the existing structure, and create a continuous sidewalk from the corner of Belden Lane to the easternmost edge of the site. Site will also include some landscaped areas and plantings and some other outdoor areas for people to use. We've designed the buildings to create like a continuous streetscape for the length of the property's frontage along Glastonbury Avenue. They will be residential in scale to blend seamlessly with the surrounding structures. For example, the building, the middle small building is designed to replicate the appearance of the existing building, and it is approximately the same size of the original structure, not including some porches that were added on and a bump out that was added on. So it's like a 28 by 32 footprint. The building to the right of it is also the same size, and the building to the left is 56 by 32. It's basically just two of the small buildings kind of put together. Again, like I said, we were going to have a continuous sidewalk from the corner of Belden Lane that will run the length of the property, and then we're going to be adding trees, plantings, some flower boxes, antique-style lightings, and hanging signs placed perpendicular to the sidewalk, like you would see in most classic villages, and also in conjunction with the recommendations of the Plan of Conservation and Development and the town center kind of district recommendations. As I said before, in regards to the buildings, there is a 2.5-story wood frame building that we were going to try to save, but again, upon recommendation of the engineer, he doesn't think that it's really feasible. So we've decided to try to replace it with something that will look almost just like it, or like it would have looked before it had multiple additions put on it, and some of its details stripped off. Like I said before, the new buildings will be residential in scale, and they'll be built with residential style materials. We've gone with a combination of exterior material. It's a combination of shingle and clapboard siding, along with wide, we're going to use PVC and AZEK type material, but wide trim boards to give it that kind of, classic New England look. The buildings are approximately 32 feet tall. The 35-foot height is what's allowable in the underlying zone, but we're trying to stay under that. Again, we don't want to try to overpower the neighborhood with our buildings. We just want to have them kind of fit in seamlessly. Each building is designed to have a commercial space on the main level and a 2-bedroom residential unit on the second level, a 2-bedroom, 1-bath residential unit. Each building module is designed to stand alone or be combined in blocks of 2 or 3 modules to offer flexibility in building type. It's because we think that, aside from this location, we feel that this type of a building use is going to be very desirable in the Hartford area, even outside of Rocky Hill. So we're kind of trying to create a formula for ourselves that will work well in these types of situations. And that's what's shown there. Again, we have 2 single buildings and then the kind of double building on the easterly end of the site. We've received quite a bit of correspondence regarding this project, both from staff and from public as well. Notably, we received a memo from the engineering department and the town engineer with a bunch of, questions, notes, and stuff to add to the plans. We have a memo from the village district consultant as well. We received letters from 2 neighbors now. Kim gave me one tonight, and I had one from earlier. And I've also met with one of the direct neighbors to the property at 2 Belden Lane and discussed a couple of their concerns. I can go into some of that now and kind of at a high level again, like I said, and then, we're really looking for additional commentary from the commission and from the public so we can kind of put everything together and update our plans accordingly and move forward with our project. As far as the engineering department, I'm assuming you all have that memo as well. For the most part, a lot of this was kind of, almost administrative stuff that needed to be added to the plans. He had a couple of questions that, we don't have a note for an ADA compliant curb ramp at Belden Lane, which of course we're going to be doing. Questions about what brand or model of bike rack we're going to use, which we haven't looked that far into the details. We have a placeholder for a bike rack, but we just haven't done that level of research. He did have some questions about parking and drainage and the site. So again, at a high level, big concern, and this is kind of across the board for everybody, the on-street parking. No one seems to like it, from engineering to the overlay the town center consultant to some of the neighbors as well. And the only reason we put it in there is because there is some recommendations in the plan of conservation and development that, I'm trying to see, it's like on page 49 or something, that actually calls out encouraging on-street parking. So we put it in there. Again, we're trying to comply with the intent of the POCD. So we put it in there for that reason, but we don't necessarily need it. We can reconfigure our parking to have the same number of spaces, I think, and just access everything from our site. So that was a big thing, and that was across the board, like I said. So we are going to change that. His other questions were about, another question he had was about grading, and that also showed up in the town center consultant's report, meaning, well, 2 different things. Town engineer was concerned that the site might be too flat to drain the parking lot adequately or quickly enough. And the town center consultant was concerned about the street elevation of the buildings versus the elevation of Glastonbury Avenue and how it would interplay with the sidewalk there. So we're, again, because this all came in like last week, I haven't even had an opportunity to look at that with my civil engineer. But if we can, it looks to me after being on site, Based on the elevation of the garage, based on the elevation of Glastonbury Avenue, we may be able to reconfigure the grading, drop the buildings down, drop the sidewalk closer to the curb, and pitch the parking lot in the opposite direction and drain the site that way. So again, that was a concern on both of their ends. Aside from that, from the town engineer, it was mostly administrative stuff for the plans. Like, we needed, the ADA parking space was supposed to be 20 feet, not 18 feet. Concrete details, there was like a typo on the plan. Details on catch basin sumps, details on a concrete washout, just, stuff like that, that he wants to see on the plans. Then we have the town center consultants' comments. Again, some of it is semantics, like the town engineer, but some of it definitely is more, get some more detailed questions about every part of the design. So again, at a high level, he had a bunch of different sections. Section number 2 on building design. He thought it would be better to have the longer building in the middle and create a more, and have the, all of the gables facing forward on the, on the buildings. He may not have understood that our reasoning for doing this was to have that center building replicate the existing building that's there. Because even if we were able to save that building, this is the layout that we would have because of how the site works. Additionally, if this was developed historically as in a village, symmetry wouldn't necessarily be part of that. Things get built over time, they get built how they get built. So our goal is to have it be actually a little more eclectic and not necessarily look like a development. But maybe we have, maybe we had 2 houses that were converted from houses to mixed-use buildings, and then a mixed-use building was built by someone else. And, that's how these things evolve over time. His next question was about the eave projection on each building. He thought it appeared shallow, but I think it's just because, he's looking at a very small rendering. He had a question about the fascias. We would have 1x8 fascia, so that's going to be more than you're going to see really anywhere else on Glastonbury Avenue. He thought the roof pitch looked flatter than other buildings in the vicinity, but, again, driving down Glastonbury Avenue, you have a very eclectic mix of houses. Our roof pitch is going to be between a 6 and a 7, which is going to not be the steepest, but also not be the shallowest on the street. And again, we're trying to keep the buildings at a residential scale. So if we were to go up to a 10 pitch, let's say, that's going to put us right to the 35-foot building height, which, we're trying not to do that. And then he had a question about adding a cupola to the larger building. I think that's just subjective. We are adding a cupola to the garage as part of our renovation. Because again, in New England, historically, cupolas would be on outbuildings or agricultural buildings, not necessarily on houses or mixed-use buildings. Then he stated that he thought the back of the building looks utilitarian, the back of the buildings. It's kind of done that way on purpose. That's our service side of the building. We want to, and again, this goes back to the plan of conservation and development. What we want to do is we want to funnel our users, other than the residential users, because they have entrances on the back. We want to funnel any commercial user or patron to the front of the building so that they're on the street side interacting with the streetscape. Continuing on, he had a question about the sign configuration. He thought it looked good, but, wanted to make sure that the bottoms of the signs are located high enough for people to walk under, which certainly we would do that. And then he thought the lighting proposal for the facades was appropriate, but was asking for specifications on light fixtures and bulbs, which, again, we're only at rendering stage for the special permit for this part of the application. When we go to construction documents, then we'll have full, lighting specs and lumens, wattage, et cetera. We just haven't developed our plans that far yet. Exterior materials and elevations, he expressed some concern about the mix of materials. So again, if you drive, and he said, he did a quick Google Street View tour of the area. However, if you drive down Glastonbury Avenue, you'll notice that most of the houses that are there have vinyl siding on them or aluminum siding. So their original details are covered up. There's a number of houses that do have their original clapboard still on them. There is at least one house that looks original, shingled and painted. There's another one that's actually currently for sale that is a mix of, it has a front porch on it, it has clapboard on the lower portion of the building, and then in the gables it does have shingle. I'm not sure if it's something that was done later. I don't know if it's original, but it is there. And also, in historic New England, it is not uncommon to see this mix of materials because it's the opposite of what is now, but historically, smooth clapboards and paint were expensive, and cedar shingles were inexpensive. So they would dress up the fronts of the buildings or the lower portions of the commercial buildings, the storefronts, to make them look dressier and fancier, and then they would use the shingles on the remainder of the building to save money. It's kind of, unfortunately, the opposite now. The shingles that are going on the sides and back are going to be more expensive than the wood clapboard, or we may use hardy plank on the front of the buildings. But I think particularly facing the south side, which is the back side of the buildings, having the weathered shingles when they kind of just gray out will be less of a stark view for the residential neighbors to the south. So then he had another question about what materials we were using. So those are the materials. Again, it'll be white cedar, shingles 5 inches to the weather, and then some kind of clapboard on the front, whether it's hardy plank or wood clapboard, and then AZEK type PVC trim around the windows, corner boards, etc. The roofing materials and colors, it's basically going to be like a medium gray architectural grade asphalt roofing shingle. Then he had a question about the floor plans, indicating there were no doors or windows on the sides of the buildings. That goes kind of back to our modular design of these. I say modular, it's not really modular, they'll be stick built, but these modules that we can kind of interact and interplay together, having windows on the sides or designing the interiors around windows on the sides would detract from our ability to do that. So we've really tried to maintain the front and backs of the buildings with all the glass. Additionally, with the units being close together, the buildings are about 18 feet apart. The neighbors would probably, the residential people would probably have their blinds closed all the time anyway, because they're only 18 feet away from the next neighbor. So then his question was, why have the courtyards between the buildings? Those are not really there to access the building. They're there to be inviting, to bring people from the parking area out to the front of the building, to make it clear that that's how you want to go, not try to access the buildings from the rear. Parking, Section 4, definitely he's concerned about the on-street parking. He says, it wasn't contemplated in the POCD, even though I did find that it was. But again, no one seems to like that idea, so we're going to restructure the parking to eliminate that. He also stated that something about the right-of-way, being in the right-of-way, so again, that's going away. Then he had a question about the garage, stating that he thought it looked like a new structure based on his Google Street View, but that's not actually the case. It is existing, and we will renovate it to bring it up to the standards of our other buildings. Then he had a question about the adequacy of the parking spaces. The regulations require 23. We're at 20, but your regulations also do allow for a 20% reduction in reciprocal mixed use. So, presumably, the people who live in the apartments leave during the day. The people who work in the offices come to work. And then the opposite happens at the end of the day. He's asking for some kind of justification from a reputable source other than me. So we are going to have our engineers take a look at that. Then he brought up the Glastonbury sidewalk grade issue, the Glastonbury Ave sidewalk grade issue, basically, questioning the height difference between Glastonbury Ave and our buildings, and if there's a way to kind of reconcile that. So again, that's something we're going to look at. Section 6, tree clearing and landscaping. He was concerned that we were clearing most of the mature trees on site, which is true. We are doing that in order to accommodate our development. And then replanting with some ornamental trees, some shade trees, and then we have other plantings in addition to an arborvitae hedge along the back of the property, separating the mixed use from the residential. And my engineer had also recommended a fence, so I said that sounds like a good idea. So he had included a 6-foot stockade fence, but in talking to the neighbors, they thought that maybe looked a little too industrial, so they asked if it'd be possible to do something a little more decorative. So we're going to, I agree with them. So I think we're going to go back to the drawing board on that and try to come up with a more decorative privacy fence of some kind. Then additional comments that he had, basically asking for some exterior lighting detail, which we certainly can provide. He was concerned about the location of the transformer for the property. We have it currently, I believe it's kind of adjacent to a utility pole that's there. So he thought it should maybe be screened or shielded in some way, which that's no problem. We can design something for that. He wanted some detail of we have a low retaining wall on the back side of the garage to reconcile some grade there. By moving the off-street parking into the site, we'll probably need one on the other side as well. So he wanted some detail of what that, just what that looked like. So we'll come up with something for that. Trash and recycling. Basically, it's not indicated on our plans how that's handled. So we need some kind of an enclosure. My engineer will get that on the plans as well. Then shared access. So again, in the plan of conservation and development, what they're asking for is with commercial development, in order to create a more pedestrian friendly neighborhood as a whole, they want to limit the amount of curb cuts. So limit the amount of times that automobiles cross the sidewalk. So what it asks for is some kind of, when designing commercial property or any property at all, to try to make access from property to property as opposed to just in and out, in and out, in and out onto the roads. So we've designed this so that at the easternmost end of the property, if the adjacent property were ever to be developed, you can continue through our parking lot into that site. He's suggesting that there needs to be some kind of easement or something. I don't know how that would work. I have to talk to my attorneys as to how to put that together and what that would look like. But we will do that. And then his last comment was on drainage. And that's a discussion that I had with staff regarding, on-site retention. And we talked about it a bit and kind of came to a consensus, I think, that because our site is so small and we are at the end of the end or the beginning, however you want to call it, of the drainage system, essentially, because everything in that area ultimately drains out into Belden Brook. And that drainage comes from, a wide swath of town. They suggested that it might be best to just get the water off the site out into the brook before the other water from, the rest of the drainage system makes it down there, because we have other parts of the system that are further away. They have some retention, whatever. So if our water gets into the system and out, it will allow for better flow for, everything upstream of us. Then a couple of the comments from the public. We did have a letter from someone on Belden Lane, asking what the nature of the businesses are that would be there, and concerned about the on-street parking. So I think, the on-street parking is going to go away. So I think we've addressed that. And then as far as the nature of the businesses, these are very small spaces. They're 896 square feet, minus a stairway that goes to the apartment upstairs, minus a bathroom. So, usable space is probably between 8 and 850. These are going to be what I think is mostly small startup or incubator type businesses, meaning someone who has a small retail business or any kind of small business actually that just can't support the cost of going into a big space on the Silestine Highway with that level of cost. Since COVID, we've seen a lot of downsizing, a lot of people working from home. We have other properties in the vicinity, other commercial properties in Weathersfield and Rocky Hill, and we've seen a big demand for small space. And one of the other things that we offer here that a lot of the other buildings on the Silestine don't have, for small spaces anyway, is private entrances. So if you do have a small business and you find a small office space in town, most times it's in an office building. And a lot of people aren't interested in going down common hallways, using common bathrooms. They're looking for kind of a standalone type space where they might get a little bit of street presence. Again, it could be small retail, small service, a small attorney, small accountant, but it's going to be, low intensity uses, at least now. If some way down the road, Glassberry Avenue evolves as a retail location, I suppose that could change, but I don't think it'll be more than that. Maybe a small flower shop or a small boutique or something along those lines where the big space on the Silestine just isn't, financially feasible. And, the same kind of goes for the apartments above. They're small, and, they're by nature going to be more affordable than the large luxury apartments that are getting built in town, you know, all over the place. And again, another advantage is you have direct access to the outside. You're not sharing an elevator, you're not sharing a hallway. It's just, you know, you have your own door to the ground. We did receive a letter today that Kim just handed to me. I was able to read it quickly while the previous applicant was speaking, and, you know, their biggest concern, for the most part, is, well, they had some concerns about density, but again, in a village district, what makes a village is density. Like, that's what makes it a village. If you go to Essex or Chester or any of the Mystic, you know, they're dense. The buildings are close together. That's what makes it walkable. That's what makes it interesting. And then their other concern was definitely the on-street parking, and some of the other parking, you know, questions about parking. And then lastly, I did have a meeting with the neighbor directly behind the property at Belden Lane, and, you know, questions again. They seem to be a common thread, like what are the business uses, because they're going to be directly affected by that. Not too thrilled about the on-street parking, and just wanted some more clarification on what we were doing for privacy screening, again, since they are a direct abutter. So that's the end of my presentation. So I'm looking forward to hearing comments from the commission and the public.
Can I make a point before we proceed too far? I'm sitting here, I'm listening to this, and it seems like an awful lot of stuff. We can do this. We will look at this. I'm going to talk to my engineers. We might change the fence. We might do this. Would it be unreasonable to actually get all these things together and present them perhaps at the next meeting rather than us? I mean, I don't know what this thing is going to look like based on what you just told me. And I don't mean to be insulting.
No, that's fine.
But yeah,
let me tell you why why I wanted to proceed this way.
Mm-hmm.
So we got the biggest one was the consultant's
Mm-hmm.
packet. You know, it's like 6 or 8 pages. I got that. I don't know the date. Like it could have been Friday or maybe Monday. So we just didn't have time to even
I understand.
address it. You know, with my engineer, everybody's busy.
But my
Engineers,
point
lawyers.
is,
No, I understand.
we don't know what. I mean, we even just got that consultant's report at 3:48 this afternoon.
Right, exactly.
I have no idea what's in it. So perhaps you can
Well, what I'd like to
suggest.
do. Yep. What I'd like to
That's
do is, and again, the reason why I'm here is because we had already sent out all the notifications, so I didn't want to not come to the meeting and make the presentation and have to re-notify everybody. Additionally, we're going back to the plans, so my thought is everyone's had at least a chance to look at the plans, come up with some ideas, formulate some thoughts. Let's get everything out now as much as we can, the public, the commissioners. So when we go back to design, you know, we can try to just do it once. So we can come back to the May meeting with a good plan that everyone gets some input on, as opposed to just saying, okay, we recess now. We have no comments from the public. I don't have the commissioner's comments, and then we do all that again in May. I mean, I know there's going to be more in May, but, you know, just trying to, you know, move it along.
And I was thinking along same lines, but I think we have public here who have, spent time sitting here. So I think we will proceed with this public hearing, get all the comments. So I think probably that will help you when you come next time.
Absolutely.
And we want to make sure that it is a complete application so that, we don't go through this again.
Right. I mean, if
So-
I had gotten the consultant's report
Right.
3 weeks ago,
No,
I would have had a lot more
It
time.
is a complete application, it's just that some of the items.
Complete in the sense, we,
Yeah.
for example, the lighting, this, that, I mean, there are a lot of things that
Lot of
we
the
can't just
details.
approve based on assumptions, so I think
of the
that's,
details.
Understood.
that's the thing.
But again, if I had that report 3 weeks ago,
was
we
gonna
would have
do
had
that.
time
Yeah.
to do
He's
that.
already said he
Yeah,
goes
yeah,
with
so he's going, so I think we will continue with our, and let's get comments from the public while they're here, so, thank you.
Okay.
I would like to,
I will be putting these lists at the podium.
okay,
And as people come up to speak, they can please print your name and address, okay, as well as state it on the record.
so we apologize, we didn't have the
Yep.
sign-in sheet in the back. Usually we have that when we have larger audience, so we go, one by one. So I know Ed is always the first one, so he goes first, but, and then, yeah, we got the second too, yes, yes. So if we can please have orderly, you can just come up. You can come up, state your name, just write the name as well, so appreciate that. Go ahead, Ed.
Thank you. Ed Ciccarello, 40 Riverview Road. Tonight I speak as the president of the Rocky Hill Historical Society. In the special permit questionnaire of this application, Section E, Environmental Protection and Conservation, number 2, the developer states, quote, "There are no historical or archaeological resources on this site," end quote. This is not an accurate statement. This property, 41 Glastonbury Avenue, is part of the National Register Rocky Hill Historic District, excuse me, established in 2007. This colonial building is listed in that report as the William Bradley House. However, our town historian, Bob Heron, believes that building was actually the William Bradford House. It is a contributing resource. 49 out of 284 historic buildings on Glastonbury Avenue, Pratt Street, Riverview Road, Washington, and Old Main Street. That comprises the Rocky Hill Center Historic District. The garage is a non-contributing resource. We'd like to ask this commission to balance the preservation of history with the needs of development. From the Village District report by third-party Glenn Chalder, Planmetrics, quote, "The planning and zoning regulations state that the original intent of the Glastonbury Avenue overlay zone was to encourage the preservation of existing buildings and to enable their adaptive reuse," end quote. He also goes on to say, quote, "These proposed buildings are not yet harmoniously related to their surroundings and to the use, scale, and architecture of existing buildings in the district that have a functional or visual relationship to a proposed building or modification," end quote. In closing, please note that there is an historic resource on this property, and we, the Rocky Hill Historical Society, ask that you balance the preservation of history with the needs of development. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Bob Herron, 37H Brookwood Drive, and I'm the Rocky Hill Town Historian. Ed asked me to make some comments on this. Back in 2016, we did a walking tour of this Central Historic District, and in support of that, I did what I call a historic title search, starting with the most current owner, who at the time was Jim Mitchell, and going back as far as I could. So I'm going to start from the back and go forward. It seems more sensible to attack it that way. Okay. The first thing I found was a man named Nicholas Cady, who sold the land to Gresham Buckley. I don't know if that name means anything to anybody. The original Gresham Buckley had a grist mill on Dividend Road. It was the first manufacturing operation in the Dividend industrial area. He was also the minister of the Congregational Church. This was his grandson. Okay. When I'm reading this, one of the things we have is the boundaries of the property. The boundaries of the property, when they bought it, say it was bounded north and south by the highway. The highway was Glastonbury Avenue, which was Ferry Road at the time, and Pratt Street. So it was a pretty good chunk of land. As a matter of fact, it was the northern part of the Boardman Grant, which was one of the original land grants along the river. So we started with our history, and I don't know if I said it, but that happened in 1765. Okay, in 1770, the house was sold. 1770, the house was built. I'm sorry. 1770 makes it 6 years older than the country, so it has historical significance. Okay, it was sold by Gresham's son Jalil to a man named Goodrich. I want to flesh this out if there's any justification for doing it. I haven't been able to find biographies for all of these people, so I'll hit the important ones. In 1824, Goodrich sold it to William Bradford. The historical registry has that wrong. I think they said his name was Bradley. William Bradford was a tradesman. He had a store on the riverfront and a huge house on Pratt Street. If you look up that hill when you make the turn, his house used to be there. He also dedicated the gate at Center Cemetery, the Bradford Gate. So if you guys are history buffs, you know what I'm talking about.
Can I, sorry to disturb, but I think if you can focus on the application, and I understand you're giving the history. So if, because that's...
What I want to do is highlight the historical people and historical facts that make this house more than just a thing to tear down and replace.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think what we do is when when the public is here to comment on, we ask them to comment on the application itself. And I think you made the point about the historic building, by going back. I mean, I think it's 1700s.
I'm commenting on the application in that it says there's no historical or architectural resources on this site. And I'm trying to make the point that, yes, there are.
Yeah. And what we also do, I forgot to mention, we have 3 minutes, for the speakers. So you are always welcome to come back. But because we have a lot of speakers here, I want to make sure that everybody gets a chance to
how
speak.
How far in have I gotten
Yep.
that we're cutting me off already?
Yep. Yep. So I think you can continue, but if please you can focus on the items. I think we got it. It's
I'm trying
historic.
to do
so
that.
yeah.
Okay, I've talked about Mr. Bradford. I hope you appreciate who he was and how important he was. Okay, let me check the next page here. Okay. Oh, we sold it to Buckley's again. I want to make the point the Buckleys keep owning this property, and the Buckleys are a very important family in Rocky Hill. Okay, you got me rushing here. Let me see what's next. Okay, an important person who owned this house was Michael Kelly. He owned the house in 1833. Michael Kelly was the progenitor of the Kelly family, which was one of the first Irish-American families to move to Rocky Hill. I've been writing a paper on the Irish coming to Rocky Hill between the 1830s and the 1860s. This was a pretty important guy, just as Bradford was a very important guy. Okay. Okay. We have a Churchill, but I won't belabor that. A very, very important person who owned this was a man named Henry H. Grant. He bought it in 1908. He was the president of the Seabury Belden shipyard down here on Hog Brook. Okay, so not a lightweight. He's a pretty important guy. We're looking for nautical references vis-a-vis this house. The last ship launched in Rocky Hill was called the Henry H. Grant. It was a 3-masted schooner, so another significant guy, which makes this, I think, a lot more than not historical resource. Okay, we can keep reading. I wanted to talk a little bit about Dominic Sabatini, who owned the house, lost it during the Great Depression. He was an Italian immigrant. He had come to Italy at the turn of the 20th century and served in World War I in the American forces, okay? Bought this house, owned it during the Depression, lost it to foreclosure, got it back. Good for Dominic. I think that's a great historical story, and it also reinforces my interest in highlighting some of our ethnic resources, our Irish Italians, our Italian Americans, Irish Americans, and reinforce the idea that there is historical resources involved with this house. One of my biggest ones is that it was built in 1770, and one of my first reactions was, this house is 6 years older than the country, and we're going to tear it down? Give me a break. And that's all I got to say.
All right, thank you. And if you can submit your testimony to the town
happy to.
for, yep.
And I need to sign this. All set.
Thank you.
Charlie Wisnowski, 670 Old Main Street. If I go over the 3 minutes, Peter Thorcell is going to give me a half an hour. I oppose the proposal in its incompatibility with the zoning regulations. I ask that you deny for the following reasons. It fails to meet the purpose of the regulations. The property is in the R20 residential district, which is principally for single-family dwellings. That is, 1 unit per lot having 20,000 square feet. In the interest of time, I'll just cite the regulations without reading much of it. Purpose, 1.B.1.1, protect property values. 1.B.1.6, prevent the overcrowding of land. 1.B.2.2, considerations to the character of each district and its suitability for particular uses, and to conserve the value of buildings and promote the most appropriate use of land. Section 3, residential districts, 3.A.2 R20. This district is intended to permit a limited increase in density, and that follows the R40 district. 3.B.1, principal uses, R20, single family. There is one single-family house now on the site of 20,045 square feet. The applicant seeks to put 4 residential units and 4 commercial units on a clear-cutted site and demolishing an historic house. The amended Glastonbury Avenue Overlay District permits you to consider mixed uses. The definition in your regulations state overlay zone, a zone in which a common set of standards is applied to a designated area that lies within one or more zoning districts, period. These regulations apply in addition to those of the underlying zoning district. In addition, the overlay zone is not a substitute zone mutually exclusive from the R20 single-family zone. In the newly amended Section 5.B, Glastonbury Avenue Overlay District, in the purpose, it still says the Glastonbury Overlay District is intended to encourage the preservation of existing buildings along Glastonbury Avenue and enable adaptive reuse of existing buildings and new construction in order to support establishment of mixed use, et cetera, et cetera. 5.B2, Village District Declared, and this language follows the state law. And I'm going to jump forward a little, and it basically says these regulations shall encourage the conversion, conservation, and preservation of existing buildings and new development of sites in a manner that maintains the historic value, distinctive architecture, and landscape of the district. Consideration shall be given to the density, setbacks, open space, height, and orientation of buildings, parking consistent with the district. In your new 5.B.C.5, design considerations, special attention shall be paid to protecting the distinctive attributes, landscape, and historic structures within any village district. The removal or disruption of historic, traditional, or significant structures or architectural elements shall be avoided or minimized. The conversion, conservation, and preservation of existing buildings and new constructions in a manner that maintains the historic or distinctive resources of a village district is encouraged. Okay, so planimetrics. He's not the names that he was called. He's not a fool. He was the man who helped create the village district language. He helped write our plan of conservation and development, and he will help write the next one that's going to be funded in next year's budget. The town engineer and planimetrics have addressed a lot of things that are important. Your regulations say that the transformer should not be in the front yard. It is in the front yard. So all those issues are important, and I look forward to seeing maybe a plan that has it. I did not see in the file any discussion of delivery trucks. Will they have to back up?
I think 3 minutes are coming up. I give you more.
Peter?
All right.
Okay, so traffic volume at the stop sign on Belden Lane. I didn't see any information. There is state DOT data about the number of trucks at Belden and down west of Riverview. And there's a lot of traffic that turns onto Belden. No dumpster locations. We're aware of that. I thought I saw in there that there's going to be a rolling dumpster for each of the 4 apartments and 4 office spaces. So that would be what? A blue and green for each? So there's 8 spaces. That'd be 16 dumpsters. That needs to be addressed. Where will kids play? Where can a person sit? Where does the snow go, front and back? None of this is addressed. There's contradictory information saying that people are at home. People will be small businesses. Well, they're probably going to work later than 5 o'clock. The idea that you should reduce parking for some sort of co-use, there are uses that are going to overlap here. Okay, I'm coming to the end. The proposal is to change use from a single-family R20 to mixed-use apartments and commercial. And your regulations in the overlay permit a restaurant. How is that going to work in this neighborhood? It's significantly changing the neighborhood. And now it's also changing the land elevation. The apartment need is being met by Kelson Row and the Vessel and conversion behind Wendy's and other proposals on the Silas Dean. Office is not in demand. The town council is permitting the office and retail at Kelson Row not to be built for 5 years. And when it's to be built, they don't have to pay taxes for 13 years. That's not going to help him in being competitive.
Stick to the application.
Can you please stick to the application? Thank you.
Down the street, there is going to be an elimination of office at the
Your 3 minutes are up, please.
Pardon, Charlie.
Come on, you have to be respectful of everybody's time, please.
Okay, I am. Thank you very much.
And the applicant, everybody. So thank you. I hope you signed out on your name.
It'll take a minute. A lot of words.
Yes, please. Charlie, take the list with you, please.
Yes, I'll leave.
Thank you.
People want to sign in, maybe they can sign in here. Yep.
Good evening. My name is Charles Scott Spiel. I'm a resident of 608 Cedar Hollow. I guess I could sign in and spell my name later. S-P-E-A-L in case anyone's keeping track. I'm a resident of 608 Cedar Hollow in the Cedar Hollow condominium complex, exactly right around the corner from where this development is proposed. So I'm here speaking to you on as several components. Firstly, as a board member of that condominium complex who lives and walks by that property every day and will be directly affected by the neighborhood. Secondly, I am a member of the Rocky Hill Historical Society. I won't belabor that point. It is utterly clear that any statements to the effect that there is not historical significance to this property are strictly not valid. Those are not legitimate statements. I'm also here as a professional archaeologist. Incidentally, I work for the state of Connecticut. I'm not here representing the state of Connecticut, but I am an employee and a professional archaeologist. And speaking towards archaeological resources, this property is highly likely to contain archaeological resources. The statement that there are none there cannot be attested and verified. You do not know if there are archaeological resources until you conduct a survey to find out. They are not evident on the surface. So in the event that you did approve this study to move forward, which I hope you don't, I would hope that you would commission an archaeological survey to find out the complete extent of damage to Rocky Hill's historical resources in advance so we know what's on there. There is an existing well on the side yard of this building. Where there is one well, there are likely to be more shafts dating back to the 18th century. All kinds of material information on this property that is likely to contribute to knowledge and understanding of these families that Bob Heron went to some length to explain to you the historical sequence of occupants here. It's highly likely that there are historical archaeological resources here, also potentially pre-contact Native American resources on this property. Given its location right above the hill, right above the river, there would have been prime Native American real estate. So I hope you will take that into account and commission an archaeological survey before you go too far down the line to evaluating what kind of damage is done to the resources. Also, as an employee of the state of Connecticut Department of Transportation, I have a reasonably good understanding of what the traffic implications are of a development of this type right there on very narrow two-lane Glastonbury Avenue, which is already a prime corridor and struggles to keep up with traffic to the ferry and Main Street. Not only that, but Belden Lane is also very small, two-lane domestic residence units that commercial traffic is going to wreak havoc upon. The next step, as soon as you try to put in sidewalks, it's nice that people want pedestrian traffic there, but Glastonbury is presently a nightmare for pedestrian traffic. You put this stuff in there, even with sidewalks, it's going to be the same. It's going to get worse. Not only that, but putting in sidewalks is going to impinge upon the yards of these historic houses. All the kinds of things out in the front yard, their stone walls, their gates, are also going to be destroyed if you have to put in sidewalks and everything else like that. There is a great space right further down at the base of the hill. It's presently an empty, vacant lot, gravel yard that would be a great place for a development such as being proposed here. But this house is irreplaceable. It is not only a historic monument, but it is a highly visible and conspicuous monument to the history of Rocky Hill right there on the route to the ferry. So I hope you will take these facts into account and preserve the intent of this village zoning district, which is to maintain a balance and keep the residential historical nature of this neighborhood intact. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Valerie Triblitz. I'm 2 Belden Lane, so I am the property that is up against the back side of this development. And we did spend some time with Nick on the property. He was very helpful. He agreed about removing the parking spaces on Belden Lane and talked about upgrading the fence, which I thought were great. In particular, I am also concerned about the entranceway from Belden Lane to the parking lot. I understand what he's saying about not having the curb cutting, but there already exists a driveway there, so I'm not sure it would make that much of a difference to just reactivate that driveway. I just want to talk about how pedestrians use Belden Lane and cross over, because that's my territory. I've walked it a million times. People walk obviously toward the southern traffic moving south along Belden, as they should, facing traffic. Then they either across the street to Glastonbury to go down to the ferry, where it's flat, where you can walk in people's yards and you won't get hit by cars, or they stay on the same side and try to walk along Glastonbury Avenue. I think that the sidewalk that Nick is suggesting is really nice, but it doesn't really solve that problem, because you can walk still along the sidewalk in front of the development on 41 Glastonbury, but you still will have to cross the street to get on the appropriate side to walk safely to the ferry. So it's nice, but it probably doesn't solve that safety issue for that area. Like others have said, it's a large development. I would like to see maybe a little less development there. Some of the comments made about the back of the building, shutters would be nice. The lack of symmetry does not bother me. I'm okay with the mix of materials. I'm okay with removing the trees that are there, as they are pretty much dead. They're vine covered. The property has not been maintained. And that's something I want to address, because I love everybody from the Historical Society. I think it's an important house, I agree. But the house I've been looking at that house for 21 years. And it is destroyed. It has not been maintained. It's gutted on the inside. And there are many, many animals living in that house right now. So I don't know what the solution is. Maybe, I don't know how you maintain a historical property like that, but it doesn't feel great to have to look at that either. I've never once complained to the owner about the property, but it is a really destroyed house. So, if we have to keep it, let's find a way to work on that together and come up with a solution. And finally, I'd like to say one plug for something that's really important to me. And I did talk to Nick about this as well. We have a severe affordable housing shortage in Rocky Hill. For Nick to make that house affordable, it would be difficult for him to as a small business, to keep up with all the regulations and keeping track of who's got what income. Since we have made some concessions to larger developers, I wonder if this does get approved, if the town would be willing to look at a way to help him or help us make this affordable, at least one unit. And I also want to say shout out to Dominic Spadaccini, who was mentioned by Bob. I met him when we were building our home, and he was a wonderful guy. Thanks.
Thank you.
Neil Frutuoso, 10 Belden Lane. So going to try not to belabor some of the things that have been mentioned before, but do have a number of concerns as someone who lives on that street and walks it daily with a 2.5-year-old and a dog. So number one, Valerie just mentioned it, the access on Belden Lane, I don't think it should be there. My dog's been hit by a car once already while on a leash walking down that street. It is very narrow, and people use it as a cut through. So I think that was mentioned before as well. I raised these concerns with Kelson Row. People who are coming up Dividend or from Route 99 from the south often go down Pratt Street to Belden to Glastonbury to avoid the lights in front of Kelson Row and the lights at Elm Street and the Celestine Highway. The Kelson Row project is only going to make that worse, including the fact that the exit onto Pratt Street from Kelson Row is, in the current plans, I believe, going to be open for their residents to exit out of. So I do believe traffic on Belden Lane is going to only get worse with Kelson Row coming on board, which leads me to my concerns with there being a driveway on Belden Lane for this commercial property, right? On-street parking was a big no for me for those exact same reasons, but I understand Nick said that he's going to get rid of that. And, you know, I do understand there's an overlay district here, but it's the Glastonbury Ave overlay district. It does not extend to Belden Lane, right? So I just think we should keep that in mind with everything that's going on here commercially. Sidewalks, you know, I know there's been some discussion about using Belden Lane to connect Pratt Street to Glastonbury Ave to get people down to the riverfront, because the east side of Pratt Street that slopes down, from my understanding, talking to town engineers, it'd be very difficult to get sidewalks down there. So I would just also want to make sure we keep in mind that this development doesn't kind of hinder or hamper the ability to get sidewalks down Belden Lane, because it's going to be a key access point and corridor, again, with the added residency up the road on Pratt Street from Kelson Row. The sidewalks, as mentioned there, you know, this picture looks really nice. There's a large buffer between the road and the sidewalks, but looking at the plans, it seems like they're pushing the buildings up and then pushing the sidewalks even further to the Glastonbury Ave. You know, I can tell you the Ambassador Transportation Building at 5 Glastonbury Ave has sidewalks that directly abut the road. They're not safe or comfortable for anybody who has a small child to let them ride a bike or walk on that piece of sidewalk. It's better than nothing, but I don't think what we want if we want to make this a true pedestrian-friendly environment. So just want to state that. I'm looking for some clarification, you know, on this kind of, when you guys changed things back in November 16, 2022, it was changed to allow, you know, building a new building instead of preserving. But there was a quote there from one of the commissioners, and I apologize, I didn't grab your name, saying that part of the character is you have single lots and you have one structure on a single lot, and that is kind of the character we want to preserve, rather than someone coming in, taking 4 lots and making something completely different than we currently have. So just kind of questioning, and someone brought it up before, is this overlay district, is the idea 1 building, 1 lot, or is it 3 buildings for 1 lot? Because I do feel it's a little dense, given the fact that it abuts nothing but pure residential zones. So, and then the last thing, you know, I know there's no crystal ball here about what businesses are going to go in there, but this area needs, the last thing it needs is another failed development or stalled development or an empty storefront like we have at the old Tapestry Rose. There's a mixed-use building just like this right across from this town hall building. It's the red building. It's got commercial in front, apartments on top. They've seemed to have rehab it. It sits vacant. So I just wonder if there's actually an appetite for this type of development in this area. I know the Kelson Road developer pushed back on planning and zoning a lot, saying, you know, this area really can't support this kind of retail, right? So I just throw it out there. You know, my biggest issues are safety, having a small child, having a dog, my wife, my family, the traffic on Belden Lane, the entrance on Belden Lane, but you know, I'd hate to see this stall, and you know, I'm sure Nick wouldn't want to see this stall either, right? It's his money that's on the line, not mine. But I think we should just kind of think through the density of that and if this area can support that. So,
Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you to the commission for giving me opportunity to speak today. I think pretty much everything has been discussed at the meeting very well by my fellow residents on
Can you say your
Belden
name?
Lane. Oh, Jacqueline Kirby, 1 Belden Lane. So the only thing, 2 things I would say, density makes a village, Nick said today to us, and it does, but we have to have the capacity to deal with the parking within that development. We can't increase the density and then expect the overflow from that is going to go out into the rest of the community. The second thing that wasn't touched on too much, was touched on but not in some detail, was the diversion of the driveway from 41 Glastonbury to Belden Lane, saying it was a safer way to go, but in fact it isn't. Belden Lane is depressed compared to Glastonbury Avenue. Cars coming up from Belden Lane and going out onto Glastonbury Avenue do not have the same level of visibility as they do below. and also cars coming from Glastonbury Avenue to Belden Lane, they have to make 2 immediate left-hand turns to get into the parking lot with very little warning for their fellow drivers behind them, which increases the risk of rear-end collision. So those are the only 2 things. And the other last thing I would say is the request for a permanent shared parking reduction. I don't think that should really be granted, because on the one hand, I don't see how you can do that and then meet the parking needs of what you're proposing. So those 2 things have to gel together, and I don't think allowing that will meet that goal. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Who is next? Signed up. That's it? Did you take away the paper, Ed? No, I'm kidding. I just want to make sure that he gives chance to everybody, you know. Anyone who would like to address to the commission?
There's one more comment I forgot. Neil Frutuoso, 10 Belden Lane. Nick mentioned something about the drainage, which is not something I thought of, but 10 Belden Lane, if you look it up, my property, there's a conservation easement that Belden Lane dumps into. So that's exactly my property that will be affected by that. Not sure if you're all aware, there's also a project going on with the town engineering staff to line the culvert that goes underneath the road, do some grading work that me and them have been going back and forth on for months. I'm actually meeting with Steve Sopolak and Jason Scott this Friday to review the latest plans. So, you know, I don't know the details of how this is going to affect that or how he would tie in directly into the Belden Lane brook, but I just want to wave the flag that is a concern of me, the drainage, and I'll bring that up on Friday with Jason and Steve as well and their plans, just to see if they're kind of aware of that and how it ties in. So sorry about that.
Keep Charlie short. Charlie Wisnowski, 670 Old Main Street. 2 points. Either, I think Kim may know, or the town engineer may know, I believe that the town of Rocky Hill has funded a sidewalk study for this neighborhood, and certainly that should be made available to the applicant and to you as the commission. That's the first point. The second point is, I grew up in a town in Massachusetts that created an overlay zone, commercial mixed-use overlay zone in a residential neighborhood, and it incurred a lot of difficulties. And I'm going to give to Kim a copy of an article that was about that issue. And one of the things they said, how could it have been better for the zoning commission? And it said to have better 3D representations of what the buildings would look like. Planometrics, Glenn Chalder has written a lot about how the buildings look. The applicant has commented on that, but I think that may help you and it may help us understand. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else who would like to address the commission? Again, anyone else who would like to address the commission?
We do have correspondence. We have 2 items.
Yeah, so we want to enter for the record.
Okay. The applicant did receive copies of these, as he indicated, and one of the people did get up to speak this evening. We have a letter received April 18th from Simi Abraham and Arun Anthony at 4 Belden Lane. We are submitting this letter to raise our concerns regarding the new building project in our neighborhood, 41 Glastonbury Avenue, Rocky Hill, Connecticut. Unfortunately, we are unable to attend today's town meeting due to some prior commitments. We moved into this neighborhood 4 years ago, considering as a quiet living environment. We are happy with that decision we made, but seriously, after hearing this new upcoming project, we are worried. Please find a couple of things we would like to address. Business. What is the nature of business and how are they going to attract customers since we already have a commercial street, Solstein Highway? Parking lots. If you have plans to use our street for parking, it's going to destroy our quiet neighborhood. How can a residential street be used for business parking? We strongly believe, our town officials, that you will find an accurate solution to make our neighborhood peaceable. We have an email received today at 4:08 p.m. It is from Jacqueline Kirby. She did address the commission today. She's at 1 Belden Lane. I'm writing to express my concern regarding 2 major issues associated with the above-referenced Captain's Walk development. First, the proposed density far exceeds suitable development for this location. The site, a corner lot approximately 1/2 acre, is planned to have 3,584 square feet of development, which results in a significantly increased zoning density of 0.7 units per acre of buildable land. This is not allowable under our current zoning regulation, which requires a minimum of 1.4 units. The plan should be reduced, consist of 2 small mixed-use structures instead of the 4 proposed. The primary reason for this option is that the parking problems created by this overcapacity will significantly adversely affect the neighborhood. Accordingly, this is against the Glastonbury Overlay District plan. Accordingly, my second major area of concern is the parking proposal. The plan, as you know, is to divert the current driveway location on Glastonbury Avenue to Belden Lane. In quote, the driveway entering from Belden Lane instead of Glastonbury Avenue will provide a much safer egress point, as Belden Lane has very little vehicular traffic, end of quotes. The developer anticipates that most vehicles will enter the complex from Glastonbury Avenue. Drivers, once they turn into Belden Lane, will have to make an almost immediate left turn to enter the planned property. This will not allow adequate warning to the drivers behind them of their intended turn, and so increase the risk of rear-end collisions. Conversely, drivers exiting the property to return to Glastonbury Avenue will have reduced visibility compared to Glastonbury Avenue, since Belden Lane is at a lower altitude and so does not provide the same expansive view. A further complication of this Belden Lane driveway location is the 4 of the 20 total of the proposed parking spaces are within the Rocky Hill Town right-of-way on Belden Lane. According to the planning consultant, Planometrics of Simsbury, the use of parking spaces for an on-street parking was not contemplated by the POCD as not compatible in this location. Instead, Planometrics recommends that these 4 on-street parking spaces should be relocated to the garage site and become 4 surface spaces. Also, another key issue with regard to parking is the proposed request for a permanent shared parking reduction be provided without providing any reason. The plan proposes only 20 parking spaces instead of the 23 as required by Rocky Hill parking regulations. The plan, in doing so, is utilizing, quote, a more conservative reduction of 80% retail shared parking factor, end of quotes, as per the plan listing. In summary, the proposed site plan for 41 Glastonbury Avenue will adversely affect the neighborhood, which goes against the tenets of the Glastonbury Overlay District project. The proposed plan is significantly overcapacitated for acreage available. Consideration shall be given to a 50% reduction in structured development. The request to change the site entrance from 41 Glastonbury Avenue should be denied. It is certainly not safer, as explained for the aforementioned reasons. If this request is not denied, it would also ensure that Belden Lane would become overflow parking lot for proposed overcapacity site. Permanent reduction in parking spaces request further increases this outcome. Thank you for consideration.
Thank you. I think we'll start questions from the commissioners, Commissioner Zarelli. And before we move on, I just want to make sure who is seated. I think we replace Commissioner Robbins instead of Commissioner
Brescia.
Thank you.
We talked about a lot of the things that I was going to bring up that are like low-hanging fruit to this application. Just want to make sure that the next set of plans has a photometric plan so that we can see, no cutoff to neighbors and that kind of thing, all the light stays on the property. You mentioned that you're removing all the trees. With your parking lot redesign that you want to do, can you look at replacing, getting some larger caliper trees on site to try to?
Sure.
Of course, this commission probably to the person is going to ask for affordable component to this. So echo some public comment of at least one dwelling, but obviously we would love more for affordable. Can you tell us about the garage and what's going to go on with the garage and why the emphasis of saving the garage versus getting rid of the garage and making it nice and clean back there?
Well, it provides parking, covered parking, and it also creates a buffer, additional buffer of just a parking lot going right to the neighbors. You know, I think once we renovate it, it'll look nice and be better than just a parking
So it's not
spaces.
storage, it's going to be for like a resident or something like that? Or?
It'll almost definitely be for parking.
With that, if you look at the existing site, the curb cut on Glastonbury Ave goes right to the garage. It like divides where you're going to be putting the two smaller square-like buildings.
Yep.
Has it ever been thought of keeping that curb cut and have it just go between the two buildings and just literally move that left, looking at Glastonbury Avenue, moving that leftmost building closer to the Belden Glastonbury corner, and that way you can utilize that existing curb cut?
Originally, that was what we looked at, but, you know, on the advice of my engineers with the sight line and then the, you know, how narrow Glastonbury Ave is, given its traffic capacity, it seemed more logical to have it come in the other way. So just like we originally looked at saving the house as well, like, you know, that was our original thought process, but it didn't seem to work well in his opinion.
Okay. Now that you have to reconfigure the parking and everything else, can you look at that again?
Absolutely.
And see the pros and cons to
Yep.
keeping that curb cut? And then the last question I have is for staff. It was mentioned by many in the public, the condition of the house and the applicant. Has this house ever been on the blight list or condemned or anything? Do you know?
I know in years past, I believe shortly after Jim Mitchell purchased the home, we did cite it for blight, with peeling paint and what have you, and it was strictly peeling paint, and that's when he painted it a different color. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
I have nothing further. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Lego?
A lot of my concerns were addressed by the public and Victor as well. One question, you said you had a structural engineer look at the existing house. I think it'd be helpful to have a report from that engineer.
Okay.
That, you know, that shows what the issues are and maybe what the cost implications would be for renovation versus demolition.
It wasn't really the cost, it was the amount of, how can I say it? Like, repair, so removal and repair of the structure that would have to be done to shore it up. We'd be left with almost nothing historical remaining. So we would basically gut it all out, strip all the siding off, have to patch in with plywood all over. It's gonna get new windows, you know, the timber frame is compromised, so it would end up getting like stick framed inside to hold it up and cut out a bunch of the timber frame that's compromised. So it's the cost isn't, it's the same. It doesn't really matter, the cost. It was just what we were left with was no longer what we were trying to save. You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Yeah,
I mean, we
understand.
do a lot of renovations as well. We're doing another house in town right now. That's an old house that was in much better condition structurally. There was part of the building that was actually an addition that was terrible, so we tore, that was built later on. Like, the original house, I think, is like 1830 or something like that. And it had a couple of additions that were built. I don't even know, it looked like stuff they found in the yard to build the additions out of. And it was basically falling down. We replaced those, but the main building was structurally sound, so, you know, we replaced the windows, restored some of the architectural detail that was covered up by, you know, years of kind of low maintenance materials, I guess you would say. And that one's coming out good, but it was structurally better. Foundation was in good shape, you know, just different.
Okay, that's all I had.
Pretty much everything that everybody else said and asked, you know, are my concerns. And I really reserve the right to ask a million questions next time because there's a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, don't take this personally again. This is one of the vaguest applications we've seen, you know, with a lot of comments like, we can do this, we're thinking about doing this, we might do that, we're going to reconfigure the parking. Usually that's all done before we actually have a public hearing.
Right, and again, we would have, but to your point, you received the.
Right, and
I had no time to address it, didn't
Correct.
want to cancel it, so we had, you know, we had our application basically intact the way that we thought it should be, and then got this pile of
I
comments.
think we discussed it, so I don't want to labor on the same issue. I think we can move on. Yep.
And that's all I have. And the other comment is, can we, you know, this report that we got today at 4 o'clock, it's dated April 12th. Can we get these things a little bit more timely?
Yes, I
mean, I haven't even read it yet.
apologize it wasn't here for.
Yeah, I haven't read it yet, so I don't know what's in it, other than the applicant pretty much explained how he would address the questions in there. So that's it for me.
Thank you.
I'm just trying to answer my own questions here, which is, you know, this is R20 Town Center overlay combined with Glastonbury District overlay. That Glastonbury District overlay, when we proposed the regulations, I can tell you that when we originally did that, we were looking at existing structures initially and turning those into mixed use to create that town center environment using what was there. And then later we came back, we added new construction for the purpose of those properties where maybe it just didn't work out. It's a house that was in disrepair that wasn't a historic building that needed to be raised and maybe put in something that met that same character and accomplished that, or a vacant lot. And what I remember most importantly was we allowed new construction because we were looking at a vacant lot. So this is not a vacant lot, and this has got right in the middle of it a significant historic structure. So what I'm wrestling with the presentation materials is, first and foremost, just a comparison to what the R20 is versus what's proposed. You know, what the TC is, what's proposed, and what Village District is and what's proposed, which is like a table with 3 columns in it, to see where all the variances are, right? Because those are the pieces we're trying to put together. Mm-hmm. And then, you know, in my mind, I'm just trying to understand more about the house. And I know we've asked questions already about the condition of the house. And you know, in my previous life, I've run, as an environmental consultant, I've run into these issues before with extremely historically significant houses, but that were in really bad shape. Now, you can get creative, and there's a lot of things you could do, but I'm just trying to get a better feel of how impossible or possible this actually is.
I mean, I'm willing to look at it again. I'm willing to bring my structural guy back there. I don't have anything against the house. It was just, and it's, you know, in our design, the reason it's designed the way that it is with that building in that spot is because our original contemplation was to use the house. Like I said, I'll look at it again. The question becomes, and it was, the question that was raised by him is, once we take out everything that's compromised, what's left?
Yeah, yeah.
And what are you saving?
And then the other thing I noticed is, and again, this is getting into details that we're probably going to discuss more later. But just, you did mention that you were going to try to preserve mature trees wherever possible, but your site plan has you taken out all the mature trees. And it just looks like there's a couple opportunities to leave some mature trees, especially along the adjoining property owner's side. One of them's right in the middle where you're putting parking, but, the question there is, could you push the parking up against the building and then preserve the tree? The other one that's over near the street on Belden Lane in the corner. It's a terrible tree? Oh, okay.
Can you please, you can have any conversation with the public, please.
Anyways,
Please.
But if there is a mature tree of significance that's worth preserving, I mean, it's just something to reconsider.
Again, we can review the site again, to see if there's, when we do have to reconfigure the parking lot, again, since that seemed to be that was one of the biggest issues, was the on-street parking, and since we're going to be reconfiguring things a little bit, maybe it falls so that something gets, we don't have to impede on something that's existing.
And just another question, curiosity, what was going to be the intended purpose of keeping the garage? Was that going to be a maintenance building, or?
Just, it's parking, and it's there.
Yeah.
And it provides a little bit of a buffer, additional buffer for the direct neighbors to the south.
Okay. And then the other questions I have, and maybe we either get the answer from staff or wherever, but if it's in a historic district that's part of the registered National Historic District, the question is the house itself on the National Register of Historic Places, or is it automatically included because it's in that district and it's on the list? So if that is the case, were there any additional notifications to the State Historic Preservation Association or that are required prior to, that we would need to have part of our record is?
The structure itself, we have one property that I'm aware of, the Duke of Cumberland Inn on the National District. This is a National Historic District, so based upon, and I know there are people more qualified to answer this in the room, Bob especially, Bob Heron, the town historian, as well as Ed Ciccarello, president of the Historic District. But they are.
And that also relates back to archaeological resources, too. Whenever I used to have to write environmental impact statements, we always had a form letter to contact the State Historic Preservation Association that would address those issues for us, to let us know.
I reviewed the file when I got back to the office, and I have not seen any communication in the file to the State Historic Preservation Office.
Okay. That's all I have for now.
Commissioner Brescia?
Was there any thought process going into changing that driveway from Glastonbury Ave to Belden? Like what?
Well, the thought was, so when you come, Glastonbury Avenue is like lower than the site, and approaching Glastonbury Avenue that way, the sight lines were not as good as coming off Belden, where the site is kind of flat coming off of Belden, and then it slopes up. Additionally, it's a highly traveled road and it's narrow. So the thought process was get it off of the busier of the two roads, get it onto the less busy of the two roads because it would be easier to egress.
Okay. So that building, the smaller building to the west,
Yep.
that's close to Belden.
Yes.
It almost seems like if that can be moved over a little bit, because it doesn't have any windows on that side at all, right? On that side. So if that could be moved over and maybe the driveway can be coming from Glastonbury more towards the middle.
I mean, we can consider it.
I don't know.
I'll look at it with my engineers. It was his recommendation.
Okay. And you have the one handicap parking space to the farthest east?
Correct.
Behind the farthest east building? So do you anticipate not having people that need parking requirements towards the middle? Like, should it be towards the middle, so in case there was someone with a wheelchair, they could?
Well, our thought, the reason it's, so it's currently it's, I think, the only parking space on the north side of the parking lot, which is the building side of the parking lot. The reason it's there is because there's direct access to the sidewalks that access the buildings. So the parking space is there, the ramp is there for them to get up onto the sidewalk, and they don't have to cross the main travel lane of the parking lot.
Okay. Okay, that's it.
Thank you. Yeah, I think there are a lot of questions, and I know you're going to address those in your next proposal. I think with the existing building, what we would like to see is, and I have seen in the past, even with state projects, where there are other options as well, like to document the building in case it's not salvageable, right? So you keep the history. We have historian here. You can document that, so we know what it was, and the history of the building itself. I mean, that's one of the options if it doesn't work out, that you can salvage it. But I think we have to see some sort of information as to why it's not salvageable, and just pros and cons of by the time you're done, this is what you're left with,
Right.
And what is the value of that as a historic building? Because we know that, when you are rehabbing a historic building, you don't want to do a wholesale change, because then it doesn't mean anything, So you try to do minimum changes. So I think keeping that in mind, you can come up with some options there. Any options, have you looked at moving the curb cut all the way down at the end? And see if, grade-wise.
Which end?
I think,
Toward the river?
Towards-
East?
yeah,
East?
The further you go east, the deeper the
Deeper it
cut
gets.
is on Glastonbury Avenue. So to the west, Glastonbury Avenue and our property are nearly level at the corner, and it stays pretty level for a bit. And then as you approach the driveway and the house, Glastonbury Avenue starts to go down, and our property actually starts to go up a little bit, and then, it gets deeper as you go.
So I think what we would like to see is, you heard the concern from the Belden Ave,
Sure.
that residents. See, what is the worst case? Is it this or that? And try to see if you can come up with some other options, in avoiding that. So, so I think that was that. For archaeological, I mean, I know state has resources, the archaeological maps, perhaps, that can be looked at and see what is the probability of having, archaeological resources there. I mean, information is out there, so might as well use that and see, what's there. We don't know how many times this property, if at all, was turned over or, disturbed or whatever, so you can look at that. I think that's what I have. Do you have any?
No, my last comment was just exactly what you just said. There's, if there's nothing salvageable about that house, to work with the Historical Society to try to figure out how to monument, whether it's naming rights, having placards showing what was there, maybe this may sound crazy, but like a walking trail. Every building has something in front of it that basically talks about the property. I don't know, something that shows that it was a historical site, it is a historical site, and has some significance, even if you can't save the house.
Any other questions from any commissioner? commissioners. All right.
I got one more question. So in terms of trying to keep some of those trees, mature trees on site, I would encourage you to get an arborist to take a look at them, because you'd be surprised. Sometimes the layperson sees a tree that, you know, has no life left in it, and an arborist can bring it back to life. So I would suggest that you do that.
So how do we want to do this? You want to,
Can I, maybe just one last comment? Have you looked at any green space or anything like that within your parking area? Any islands or some open space or something like that that attracts and
We're trying to, so we're under the lot coverage allowable. So we were trying to keep all the parking just as dense, like, together as possible, so we could have larger green space on the outskirts where it will impact the neighbors, as opposed to just having like a little island in the middle of the parking space, in the middle of the parking row.
All right, thanks.
what do you want to do? On recess?
Recess, yeah.
Motion to recess the public hearing.
Second.
To when?
May, our next
May 17th, I believe.
17th, May 17th meeting.
Now, does that give you enough time?
May,
That's our
Okay.
next
it's
meeting.
May, oh yeah, hold on.
No, but
That's our,
Is that the only way to do it, so May 17th, or do you think you could go to June?
I mean, we can go.
You can go to June.
We can go June.
June
That's-
21st then is the next one.
I'll second that.
I would,
Comments?
I would put it on the May agenda and see where Nick's at, just to
Then grant the
just to
extension.
move it
That's fine,
on.
we could do that, that's fine.
So
And
it's
then
going to be,
if it's not ready, we can talk about.
so on the agenda for May 17th.
That's good, that's fine, thanks again.
Okay, I'll second that.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, any opposed, motion passes. Thank you.
I gotta fix my chair. It keeps going down.
Item 1C.
Zone change application proposing to change the zone on a portion of 1800 Solstein Highway from a regional commercial zone to an R20 residential zone, Stephanie Place, LLC, ID 04-412.
Do we have applicant? Okay.
Yeah, you're coming up pretty soon. Yeah. Yeah. We'll let you-
Can we recess this hearing and open the meeting and allow?
Yeah, okay.
Do you think it'd be long, or?
We can ask the applicant if that's okay.
Yeah, do that, because, I mean, the poor guy's been here for 2 hours.
I don't know, I mean, I
Okay, we
think,
have to.
let's just continue.
Yeah.
Let's-
Yep.
It's too much. Please, our meeting is still on, so please.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. My name is Robin Pearson. I'm an attorney with the law firm of Alter and Pearson in Glastonbury, Connecticut, 701 Hebron Avenue, and I'm here tonight on behalf of the applicant. The applicant is Stepney Place LLC, which is the owner of the Stepney Place Apartments at 1800 Silestein Highway. Also with me this evening are two representatives of the applicant who are here to answer questions, should that be something you would like to have addressed to them. And I'd introduce first Newt Brainerd, who is the Vice President of Simon Conover Company. This entity is a Simon Conover company entity that owns Stepney Place Apartments, as well as Christine Victor, who is the Acquisition and Development Associate with Simon Conover Companies. We did provide the requisite mailing notices, and I'm going to leave you with the Mailing receipts, and I know Christine gave them to me, and now I'm trying to figure out what I did. She just gave them to me, so I know I have them. It's just in my movement over to here. You see them? Oh, underneath, where I put them so that I could submit them. I apologize. I have here in my hand 197 receipts because the 500-foot radius for this particular property takes in a lot of different ownership parcels. So I will submit that now. We have also posted a sign on the property noticing tonight's public hearing. You have received, as part of your application materials, a plan that is designated as BC1, Proposed Zone Change Plan. I'm showing you a copy of it, but you should have a colored copy of that, which designates the parcel itself. This is a, in the yellow lines, that outlines this 9.9 acre parcel of land that constitutes the parcel of land on which the Stepney Place apartments are built. You'll note that the Stepney Place apartments front directly on Silas Deane Highway. That's a 5-story structure, a significant number of units, and the entire parcel itself runs in an east to west direction, with much of the parcel behind the commercial uses that exist on Silas Deane Highway. The bulk of the site, 6.7 acres, is zoned R20. That R20 zone begins along Silas Deane Highway, and you can see the dividing line at the easterly end of the site, which shows where the 2.2 acres are that are currently zoned RC, which is regional commercial. So the entire site is 9.9 acres. Only 2.2 acres, or about 1/3 of the site, towards the unimproved area, is zoned regional commercial. As I mentioned, the site plan that you have before you, or the zoning plan before you, shows the 500-foot radius and all the properties that were noticed in this application. It's important in terms of the analysis that you're going to undertake as to whether or not to approve this requested change of zone for the 2.2 acre portion that's RC to R20, to understand the context of the neighborhood within which this parcel is located. If you look to the upper portion of that 500-foot radius, which is, I see we don't have a north-south arrow on this, but it is to the north. The bulk of that multifamily development to the north, it comprises Greenfield Village. And I should note also that a Simon Conover company entity owns approximately 80% of the 230 units in that development. So in terms of impact with regard to this change of zone, certainly the most impacted percentage of people owning that is the same applicant that's before you this evening. The Marshall Street homes are mostly the single-family homes are to the left, which is the northwest side of the site. There is also Parsons Village, which is the condominium development or apartment complex, I'm not actually sure which. Oh, no, it's condominium, to the east, and you can see those are the sort of gray buildings that are outlined there. And then all of those uses, the single-family uses along Marshall Road and in the upper portion within that 500-foot radius, and to the east for the residential uses to the east, those are all zoned R20. And I understand in speaking with Ms. Ritchie today that you've received a zoning map, and maybe you had a copy for me?
Well, it's not as detailed.
Which might be easier for you to understand as opposed to looking to what we have provided here, except as now that I look at it, I think really the easiest thing for you to understand the zoning in the area is to refer to this zoning plan that we submitted. If you look at all of the parcel numbers underneath that zoning map, it identifies the zone category for each one of the parcels that are numbered, and they're shown as 1 through 75 within the area of notice, people who receive notice. So again, that's all on the zoning plan, the zone change plan, ZC1. All of the commercial properties along Silas Deane Highway are either zoned RC or C, commercial. So all of the properties to the south of our site and directly to along Silas Deane Highway, either to the west or east of our site, are zoned commercial. In speaking with staff about this, staff was not really sure as to why that 2.2 acre portion of our site was ever zoned RC to begin with, but it would just be conjecture to say why. We're not sure, but that's the way it's been. And again, it's only one parcel, and it is split zoned. So what we are requesting is a change of zone for 2.23 acres of this 9.9 acre property from the existing regional commercial RC to residential R20 zone in which the rest of the parcel is located. And I'm sure you're aware of this, but it's interesting because your zoning regulations don't specifically address this area, this issue. But typically, municipalities discourage the split zoning of a single parcel of land. There are many reasons for that, not the least of which is that it can be confusing for how development should proceed on the site. Some municipalities have regs that say if one side, if more of the site is in a particular zone, then that would override the other zone. Some say if it's a split zone, then usually the more restrictive zone should apply. You don't even have a section in your regulations that suggests that when establishing zones, they really should, zoning districts, they should follow property lines. Many municipalities have that suggestion in their regs. In any event, what we have is what we have, and we have to deal with it, and that's why we're here before you this evening. There is a structure already on the existing R20 portion that has been used for commercial purposes. You can see it, it's sort of pale blue in that site plan map showing the parcel. And that has been used off and on for commercial purposes since the inception of the Stepney Place apartment complex. So we're now at the point where the applicant wishes to improve the property. It's got an unused portion of this site that would be appropriate for development, and it would like to be able to improve the site by adding three residential structures and a clubhouse, and remove that commercial structure. The R20 zone allows multifamily structures when a multifamily use was established on the parcel by 2006, which is the case here. And that I'm not sure what the exact construction date for Stepney Apartments was, but it's been there. Mr. Brainerd advises me it was probably constructed in the early 80s, but clearly that portion, that area, that parcel has been used for multifamily uses prior to 2006. Our concern, as we looked deeper into our proposal for development of the site, is that we do not believe it's clear that the RC zone portion of the site would accommodate the residential structures. It clearly accommodates any residential, any accessory use to residential structures where those structures on the parcel were in place by 2006. Whether or not, you know, a new residential building with units in it would fall into the category as accessory to the main structure is not clear. But making that clear would, if we were to rezone it to R20, that issue would be removed and would allow the applicant to reinvest in this property and build it out to its highest and best use, which in this case we believe, and that is the purpose for the zone change, would be for additional multifamily use. So rezoning the entire parcel to R20 will provide clarity in addition to a number of other benefits. The benefits are as follows. The proposed rezoning will make the entire parcel compatible with the R20 zoning of the abutting properties on the east, except for that commercial property, which is number 49, when you look at your rezoning map. And except for the the commercial properties along Silas Dean, both to the south, north, and somewhat to the west. Preserving the 2.23 acre portion of the site that's now zoned to RC for some future commercial use is not the highest and best use of that area, as it is located behind those existing commercial properties along the highway. So even though it's zoned RC, it's not an ideal site for RC development. There is no direct access to that area except through the apartment complex. So keeping the RC zone makes little commercial sense unless it is hoped or intended, or something the commission would like to see in the future, that it would be combined with one or more of the commercial lots on Silas Dean in the future to allow a larger commercial development to the rear of the existing line of commercial uses on Silas Dean. We don't think that makes sense, but that would be one reason that, should you find that to be a more beneficial use, I suppose that that would be a basis for deciding that keeping the RC zone makes more sense there. But a commercial use, if allowed as a mixed use on the site as it's currently zoned, would also not be as compatible with the existing residential properties as would be additional residential apartments on that unimproved portion of the site. Additional multifamily would obviously serve as a buffer for the existing residential uses that are to the north, east, and west of the site, but primarily for those that are above the commercial uses on the Silas Dean commercial corridor. With regard to the bulk standards and what a change in zone from RC to R20 would mean for future development, I'd like you to note that the underlying standards of the RC and the R20 districts, which would govern future development on the parcel, are the same in most instances, including allowable building height, which is 35 feet. So whether RC development takes place or R20 development takes place, the maximum height of any structure is 35 feet. However, the R20 zoning standards are more conservative with regard to building coverage. In the R20 zone, only 20% of the site can be used for building coverage, whereas in the RC zone, the building coverage maximum standard is 30%. So that development on the 2.23 acre portion of the site would be more compatible with adjacent residential zone uses than would development under the RC zone were to stay RC. So I think I made that point clearly, but I'll just say it again, that if it is changed to R20, that is a stricter building coverage requirement that one has under the RC zone. So that's another benefit for doing it. So we have the compatibility issue, we have a stricter bulk standard under the RC zone, and we have the benefit of buffering the commercial uses from all the residential uses to the north by virtue of allowing a multifamily development to be used as a buffer between the Silestine activities and the residential uses that are already in place. We have been before two commissions. You know that we've been before you informally back in June 15th, 2022. We came before this commission and just talked about, theoretically, I know that, and you know that, anything that you said to us through the course of that proceeding is just informal. It's not binding on the commission in any way. But you did make a number of comments and observations regarding things that you thought would be desirable for us to pay attention to as we prepare any future applications coming forward. And in this case, that would mean in terms of preparing a site plan application for the site. Since then, the applicant has been refining its proposed plans and working with town staff regarding design and access issues, all of which is going, I think I can say, and Kim can correct me if she feels otherwise, but are going well. We've met with fire staff and have resolved some issues that were out there with regard to access and for the site for future development. You may or may not know that we also met with the Zoning Board of Appeals recently and had a hearing before that board on March 21 of this year. We were seeking a 5-foot variance to increase the allowable 35-foot height in the zones RC and R20 with regard to this site to be able to put a peak roof on the multifamily structures we would like to bring forth to this commission through the site plan process. And we thought a peaked roof would be more attractive. A less than peaked roof is possible, but as it turned out, the Zoning Board of Appeals did not grant that variance. We did send notices out to 152 owners in a 200-foot radius. We are informed by staff that I shouldn't say at least, that one person did come into Town Hall to look through the plans. Once they understood that a peaked roof is what was being proposed, they indicated that they were comfortable with that and that a peaked roof probably would look better than would a flatter roof. And at that hearing itself, one resident did come and spoke in favor, a different resident, and did come from the neighborhood and speak in favor of that application. Nonetheless, it was denied by the Zoning Board of Appeals, a vote of 3-2, 3 in favor, 2 opposed. As you probably know, it requires 4 votes from a Zoning Board of Appeals, not a bare majority, in order to secure a variance, so our application failed. But it failed because the Zoning Board of Appeals persons who voted against it said, look, you just don't have a hardship. You can do this with a less than peaked roof, and therefore we do not feel that we can support this. Even one of those 2 members that voted against it identified himself as a resident of the area and said he agreed that the peaked roof was much more attractive, but said he could not vote in favor of it because aesthetics are not a relevant standard for the Zoning Board of Appeals. And as much as I would like to have disagreed with him, I could not do that. The application was denied. But with regard to the considerations that you have, hardship is certainly not one of them. Here, for this commission, as you consider this application, you must look at whether or not the proposed change in zone is compatible with the existing zoning of the area and with the existing uses that are in place within the area. And I believe we've already discussed why we believe that is the case, that it is compatible, and that the use would be much preferred to commercial use on that portion that's zoned RC. But you also have to look at compliance with the policy guidelines of your Plan of Conservation and Development, and that's the 2015 POCD. And I'd like to go quickly to your POCD and go through the reasons why we believe it is also compatible with your Plan of Conservation and Development. And I will leave with you, I took the liberty, the remarks I'm going to give to you now, I've added those on to the memorandum that you have in the application file, which did not include an analysis of compatibility with the Plan of Conservation and Development, but I'd like to put that in addition to my remarks in the record, and I will leave you with 10 copies of that. But what I'm going to say to you now is what is exactly in the document that I will leave with you. So regarding compliance with the Plan of Conservation and Development, the requested rezoning of the commercial portion of the Stepney Place parcel is consistent with all key objectives of the Rocky Hill POCD relative to the management and guidance of residential development as follows. And these guidelines are all set forth on pages 56 to, I think it's 58. Yes, 58 of the Plan of Conservation and Development, and they are as follows. The first guideline with regard to what you would look for in residential development in town, it says, number one, maintain a diverse housing portfolio. The POCD recognizes the importance of diversity in housing options throughout the town and calls for the continued support of diversity in the town's housing options for both residents in the town and the region. And that guideline is at page 56. And so in our analysis as to why we believe we comply with that, I believe it recognizes that low-rise multifamily structures, in this case that would include a 3-story structure, as an appropriate option between single-family, townhome, and mid-rise structures. And I've already mentioned to you, we have something you could qualify or characterize as a mid-rise structure on the site, which is this 5-story Stepney Place apartments. This application, therefore, is compatible with this first residential housing guideline of the 2015 POCD. And by that, again, the guidelines suggest there be diversity in housing options. It lays out 4 housing options: single-family, low-rise, mid-rise, and townhomes, and it calls for a diversity of housing options in an area, and we would fall within that with this proposal, which we would get to with a site plan application as a next step. The second guideline on page 57 states that the Commission should take into consideration the protection of residential neighborhoods and areas. And it says, Rocky Hill is primarily a residential community. For this reason, the POCD recommends that the town continue to protect the integrity of residential neighborhoods from encroachment by business activities, and that appropriate buffers and transitions be provided between business uses and residential area. And our statement as to compatibility says that the proposed zoning is in compliance with this POCD policy to protect the character and integrity of residential neighborhoods. The change in zone from RC to R20 for the eastern side of the site will allow multifamily structures to be constructed as a buffer between the existing business uses on the Silestein Highway and the existing residential uses to the north and east. Without the change, business uses could be extended in the future up to the boundaries of both Greenfield and Parsons Village. The RC zone is intended for, and I quote this from your definitions, more intensive retail and service-type activities that attract business from a regional area with suitable highway access infrastructure, close quotes. So allowable RC uses include retail stores or services with drive-through service, commercial amusements, restaurants, marijuana dispensaries, automotive services and car washes, offices, and breweries and brew pubs. That's not everything, but that gives you an idea. Consequently, we believe they are less suitable at this location and would be a continuation of the multifamily uses already established on this site, but now constrained by the development standards of the R20 zoning regulation. And the last guideline for managing residential development says to provide for housing options. And that section on page 58 reads, while Rocky Hill has a diverse housing stock today in terms of the number of multifamily units, most of those units were built in the 70s and may not be well designed for housing needs of today or tomorrow. There is expected to be a need during the planning period for additional housing units that are, 1, suitable for an aging population, since there will be a large number of people in the older age groups, and 2, more affordable to moderate income persons and households. And we believe our request is compatible with that particular guideline in that the zone changes to eliminate commercial uses and allow only R2 uses on the remainder of the site is in compliance with this POCD guideline. The POCD guideline recognizes that multifamily units are desirable because they are typically smaller than single-family homes, require less maintenance by the resident, have shared services such as recreational amenities, and are typically a less expensive housing choice than single-family homes. All positive considerations listed in this guideline as reasons to encourage construction of additional multifamily housing. So in summary, this proposed change of zone to R20 for the 2.2 acres of the Stepney Place apartment site currently zoned for regional commercial uses meets all 3 guidelines in the Plan of Conservation and Development for the management and guidance of residential development in town. And nowhere in the POCD did I say, or did I find anything that would say that eliminating an RC zone at this particular location would be detrimental to the guidelines for business development in the in your Plan of Conservation and Development. So with that, I would like to leave the memorandum with the Plan of Conservation and Development guideline analysis added. There should be 10 copies there. And we'd be pleased to answer any questions that you have, or.
I would like to ask public if there is any comments on this proposed. Charlie? No?
Leave Charlie alone.
Oh.
No.
You asked. May I ask the commission question to ask the applicant?
You can ask it.
We're gonna have to have somebody listen.
Can't he ask?
Charlie Wisniewski, 670 Old Main Street, Rocky Hill. As Kim, as the Kim Ritchie, our town planner, I believe, is the chairperson at the moment for the Affordable Housing Committee, which is yet to be formed, but you all have adopted an affordable housing plan. So my question to the chairman, if you could ask, maybe you know already and I missed it, elderly, we need housing that doesn't echo. How many units is the Conover Company proposing to develop and how many will meet the
This is-
state
Point of order,
guidelines
this is out of
for
line.
affordable
I
housing?
think we don't have, again, I think this is for zone change, so, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to just put on the record, and I agree that it's really a site plan issue, but this commission had suggested that we keep in mind the need and desire for affordability, and we will be incorporate some aspect of that in our application. And in terms of the number of units we had submitted to you, we're still at 72, right? When we came before you informally, we had anticipated we would be coming forth with a 72-unit development, and that's what we're going to, nothing's changed from that. So just for the record, and to satisfy the comments that were put forth, want you to understand that.
Thank you. Commissioner Zarelli?
I don't have any comments. Everything's been answered in my fact.
Mr. Leco?
Me neither.
I mean, when you put the two pieces together, or this one parcel, you're going to restrict yourself to 20% coverage and 1.4 units per acre. However, by combining it, you're going to have a larger parcel where you can spread out the units, correct?
Yes, it'll be spread out throughout, but we're proposing 72 additional units on there. The density won't be 1.4 per acre. The density will be based on multifamily uses that have already been established for this parcel.
Because our 20's got 1.4 units.
Yes, and we're not speaking of a project right now.
So
No,
zone change.
Yeah.
Zone change.
Right. I just wanted to be clear for the record that that zone change is going to work for you
This
to conform with the R20 rule.
This parcel already far exceeds that density requirement in the R20 zone. This is an odd parcel. It's already got already 171 units on the site. And it used to have more, and that's true, and there was a fire and some of those units were removed. When the zoning was redone in town prior to 2006, or in 2006, there was an exception and regulations that allowed multifamily as a principal use on those parcels where multifamily was already in existence as of 2006. There were no multifamily regulations for that carried over in the new regulations. So if you were to develop R20 on a different parcel now, a parcel that didn't have multifamily uses established as of 2006, you would have to adhere to that density requirement. And clearly, you're not going to get a lot of multifamily with that kind of density requirement. But for those parcels that had multifamily uses established, the development can continue on the site, and the standards that would apply would be those bulk standards with regard to height, setback, things like that. So it's a very unique situation. It affects a very limited number of parcels in town, but it has to do with multifamily developments in place on one parcel of land, which is what we have here, prior to 2006. I might add, just for you to think about this, that it did not, they could have changed it back then just to make it all legally non-conforming. They didn't do that. They created a special provision in the R20 zone for multifamily parcels that were in place prior to 2006.
So by making this R20, it would restore the grandfathering?
It's not even grandfathered. It would
Well,
continue development of the use that was established prior to 2006.
Okay, right. That answers it.
Commissioner Bishop?
All set.
All set? Yeah, I don't have any questions. Any further follow-up?
Motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion passes. I'm going to call the meeting to order, regular meeting. Any public comments on the items that are not on the agenda? Seeing none, moving on to item 4, consent agenda. Can I have a motion? Whoever was here.
Motion to approve the consent agenda.
Can I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I abstain.
Any opposed?
Abstain from the March one because I wasn't here.
Oh,
but,
okay.
Did you get?
I abstain from March because I was not here.
Okay, it's still 3-0.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Item 5A.
Special permit site plan application for Jun Zhang, proposing a commercial amusement entertainment center, trampoline park, and foam pits for property located at 30 Water Chase Drive, formerly the Porter Chester Institute, in a regional commercial zoning district, ID 04-348.
Can I have a motion, please?
Motion to approve special permit site plan application for proposed commercial amusement entertainment center.
A second?
Second that.
All in favor on motion?
Aye.
Aye.
Am I good?
Congratulations.
All that.
That was easy.
Could have saved 2 hours.
Thank you. Item 5B.
It's going on.
That was recess.
We're tabling that.
We're tabling that.
That was recessed.
That was recessed.
Recess.
That was recessed,
Yeah.
so that's removed.
5C.
Zone change application proposing to change the zone on a portion of 1800 Silestein Highway from a regional commercial zoning district to a R20 residential zoning district. Stephanie Place LLC, ID 04-412.
Have a motion?
Motion to approve the zone change application for 1800 Silestein Highway.
Second.
All in favor? Or any discussion?
Well, we got to state in the record that it does adhere, it cleans up the parcel.
It's a zone change.
It cleans up everything that's going on, and it is consistent with the plan of conservation development as per section 9F4.
Any other comments? All right, all in favor of the motion?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion passes.
Congratulations.
Item 5D. I think that's
That quest for extension on that one.
extension.
5D, yeah, that's,
So I think we have to be,
that's item 7 in the agenda.
yep.
Yes. But there is I guess they put it on the agenda as a communications at item
But I
7.
think it
But
should
there
be-
is it should be dealt
Yeah.
with now. There is a request in the packet for an extension. They are working with the town of Cromwell. There's an application before the town of Cromwell presently at the same time, and the Cromwell Planning and Zoning Commission does have some major concerns, so there will probably more than likely be revisions to the plan.
Okay. So we don't have to.
We don't have to,
We don't have to do
Table
anything,
that.
right?
yep. 5E.
Site plan application, Ace Hardware, proposing an outdoor display area for property located at 945 Cromwell Avenue, Rocky Hill, Connecticut, in a C Commercial Zoning District, ID 16-262.
I don't know if anybody was here for this request.
She was, but she left about
Oh,
7:30.
oh, well,
But,
I didn't know who was.
yeah,
in.
she was sitting in the corner back there.
Okay, I didn't know who was present, so.
Do you know?
So we don't, we-
Did you know?
what do we do? Do we recess?
Yeah,
There's no applicant here.
Yeah.
right.
Should we recess it until
I
the end
could
of the
say
agenda?
it could
and
be,
then-
it could be tabled. I would just state for the record that there had been executive orders for outdoor dining and outdoor retail, and those executive orders are expiring in quick order, hence the application, so.
Can we table it till next?
Yes.
Okay.
Motion to table to the to the May 17th meeting.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion passes.
Kim, just a question. The area that they're asking to use,
Well, we tabled it already.
I think we tabled it, right? So
I'm
that's,
sorry.
Could you give me a call tomorrow?
Okay, yeah.
Or we can talk after.
all
Sorry.
right. Item 5F.
Discussion, former Connecticut Foundry property, Riverfront Future Partners, minor modification on property known as 55 and 65 Glastonbury Avenue, ID 10-160 and 161 and 125 and 154 and 205 Meadow Road, ID 10-324, 2 and including 10-327.
okay, the reason I keep asking about this is, have any minor changes been approved since last summer or so? There's been a lot of talk among the residents and even other people that there have been some approved, and we have no idea what they are, if they were. Now, if they weren't, then it's a moot point.
Okay, and I know that this came up at the last meeting also. There was in September, a change approved, and there had been, Dave put together something, I guess, that was discussed at the last meeting, I don't know. It should be in your packet. And I don't know if Ed or Charlie did receive this, that I don't know. No? And I don't have extra copies of
for
it,
the
but I will
commission.
get it to you.
For the commission.
It's for the commission.
It's for the
so that
commission.
was for,
Okay, I'm sorry. But there was in September modifications proposed and approved. There had been, prior to that, modification proposed and approved, and that was back in 2020. There was a Mylar signed and filed. There was no Mylar signed and filed with the September modification. Unless it came in the last month, and I don't believe it has.
So what is it? What is the actual change?
So the change is right there. The actual change from September 2022 to original. So the parking increase of 50 space, unit increase of 19 units, building footprint decreased by 13,223. Total building coverage decreased by 2%, impervious coverage decreased by 3.6, and landscape increased by 0.6%. So, and I think the memo identified, per section 9.c.6, what those, that's the staff provided, whether there was any changes and what it was, whether it was significant or not. So based on at least reading from what has been provided by staff and supported by all the three approvals, it looks like this is like a minor amendment.
So there've been three?
One original and two.
Oh, the 2020,
Yeah.
you signed the Mylar.
Yep.
I saw that, and we got
Yep.
a copy of that.
There were,
2023.
Dave attached 3 copies of the plans, the original, the 1120 modification, and the last one.
Right.
They're small versions, so.
Yeah, the tiny. Well, I guess the confusion is that our zoning regulations, section 9.c.6.3, say that the town planner or other designee shall report the approval of minor changes to an approved site plan to the commission at the next regularly scheduled meeting. There's been at least 5 regularly scheduled meetings since September, and in each case, we weren't given any details about this until obviously tonight.
I know there was something in one of the packets during one of those meetings. I don't have that information.
There was
Now, but-
an email string in the January meeting.
I will get that for you. I don't have that now.
I mean, I think, we are looking at what's in front of us, whether it came or when. I think a lot of things were going on personally, and, I think we are here to decide, what we have in front of us and whether that makes sense, and then move on, right? I mean, that's what it is.
Right.
I think
I think-
Alan's talking about procedure, and I think we just go forth as a commission in prospective, saying, let's make sure that we see all minor modifications. Am I correct, Alan?
Yeah, we'd have to change the zoning regulations then, because the zoning regulations currently give the planner or the staff.
No, I think-
I'm
For-
saying
for
is
this
that as
particular-
part of our agenda,
Yeah, we should.
we just make sure that we're diligent on, are there really any minor, that's what I'm getting
Oh,
at.
I got you.
Not changing the regulations.
And I think,
One of the conversations that I had today, the day of the meeting or the day before the meeting, I called the chair, whoever the chair is at the time, and we reviewed the agenda. And one of the things we talked about, and it goes with zoning enforcement, because I think that came up at the last meeting about going back to that spreadsheet with zoning enforcement, and adding minor modifications to that as well. So that would be a separate part of the spreadsheet, as well as outdoor dining is now coming back with that new regulation, so that would be part of it as well. And that's something that I think would certainly, you would have the date, you would have
I think that will help.
what it is.
I mean, there was some confusion in the regulations too, where it defined what was a major modification, and one of them was an increase in the number of residential units, and 19 plus units is, from 78 is 20, about 20%, 25% from the original.
Yeah, this wasn't, in my mind, this would not constitute a minor modification.
so I think,
So that's why I mentioned that when perhaps we should revisit the zoning regulations to actually define specifically either what a minor modification is, because it's very vague. It says, or in the opinion of yada yada.
Okay.
Either do that, or
That's-
say that even minor modifications come before the commission as an agenda item.
and I think
Or in your packet so we can see them, or whatever it is.
No, for our approval.
I think if that's, I just want to bring out, we'll be sitting here 3 hours every meeting, because the minor modification, I don't know how many we get, but can you give some example of what minor modification is? I think,
I went through the last 12
Yep.
meeting minutes. This was the only minor modification. I think there was one in January of 2022. So it's only happened a maximum of 2 times in 15 months. So we're not going to be,
so
A
there is
3-hour
there is another issue to that, right? There is a time frame issue.
My back's turned.
So what can happen is, there might be an applicant who is working on something, and something comes up, and they can't wait for our next meeting or a meeting after that, right? I think that's the concern as well. But Kim, if you can give us some example of a minor modification
Yeah, I mean, you can
is.
spell out, if you want to change the regs, I mean, you can certainly spell out, if you were increasing
Right.
units by
Scope
X amount.
or,
This
Well,
isn't
well,
a-
no, I would be very specific.
Okay.
Yeah.
But we have people that are coming in now saying, and they haven't put forth a plan yet, but they want to change, there's a buffer, it's a white pine buffer, and as you know, white pines, they're fine when you plant them, but then they grow, and then there's the trunk, and the bottom, the base dies, and the buffer is no longer appropriate. It's not a buffer anymore.
Yeah.
Well, there's 2 properties that have talked to me recently about where the buffer is not providing the buffer anymore, and we're getting complaints from the abutting property owners. So what we want to do is change the species or put up a fence. Well, does that require does that require coming back?
So, Kim,
If
to
you're
Alan's-
changing from this
point-
type of pine to that type of pine, I don't think that should
And
come.
we've got an increase of 50 spaces. I don't know how many there were altogether, 100.
Okay, I was talking about the
180.
examples, so.
Yeah,
But that's
okay.
why I'm saying, if you want to actually detail out
Mm-hmm.
what would be,
That's something I think we should do.
To Alan's point, Kim, what is that process?
for,
To like, we want to change one thing in that regulate, is it like
it's a zoning regulation amendment.
We have to
That's-
amend.
okay,
And so you can
that's
talk
something
about that
that's-
right
okay.
now, and we can put that forth at a subsequent meeting.
I think we should.
So-
I think it's, this isn't the first time I've seen this, although I'm talking about 10 years total. But, and this isn't a timing issue either, because this was September 2022, and now
Right,
we're
I'm
8
not-
months
this is
later,
not
and
timing yet.
they haven't started construction yet, so
So
there's no timing issue.
let's talk about going forward. What do you want to talk about? You want to do increasing residential units, increasing parking spaces, increasing, what are your kind of
I'll-
your flavors of?
I'll write up something and,
And give it-
we'll
Yeah.
suggest
Okay.
it at a subsequent meeting.
Okay.
And it's not a rush either, it doesn't have to be in May or
Yeah.
whatever, but it's
No,
just
I'm-
something that I
I'm-
think.
I'm okay with what you
We
wanna
have
do.
to address, because it's come up more than once, and it's been, I've seen.
To Dimple's point, we just don't want 3-4 hour meetings for, a tree change.
But like I said, there's
Change
been
the
only
street.
2 minor modifications in 15 months, so it's not going to be a 3-hour meeting every month.
But we would see it on our Excel sheet as a
Yeah.
documented
Right.
thing. So let's weigh the pros and cons to
Yeah.
all of these, minor and minor, you know what I mean? So, but I'm absolutely, I'm okay with what,
Fine.
Okay.
Can I speak?
unfortunately, this
I
is not a
think it's
public.
not a public,
You could suspend the rules. So I'll be very brief. I mean, you guys totally missed the point.
no, I think it's,
Beginning of next meeting.
yeah, we,
This is just gonna, you're just gonna forget about the foundry?
I mean, I think it's just,
You didn't even talk about the building that was totally removed
Building
and
five.
changed to a clubhouse.
Yeah.
That's a major change.
so, again, I think,
And it stated, there's something else that was attached.
Yep.
Dave had attached this, in my packet, it was attached to the Ace Hardware info, by accident, I don't know. But I found it when I went through it. And there's stuff that's in bold,
yep,
That's
that,
the same.
Oh, yeah, I might have that.
yeah.
it says, because I guess the community room in the clubhouse, there is a community room that remains in the clubhouse, and that was in some minutes presented at one of the council meetings. So I guess there is some community space in the clubhouse that is remaining.
Well,
It's
but that's
there,
a change,
so-
that's a change in use, though. It wasn't a clubhouse, it was a community house originally. But anyway,
I don't see that.
this is all moot because this is already over and done with, but I just want to prevent this from happening in the future, and that they come to us, not to the town council, please. I mean, we're the
Oh,
ones.
no, they provide, that was, what that was referring to is, I guess, every few months, either the attorneys or engineers go to the town council and provide updates.
Okay.
Town council. That's what that was.
So I think if you can work on that.
Yeah, I'll just come up and we'll discuss it, maybe have an open discussion
Yeah.
amongst us and
put it up, yeah.
figure out what we want to do, and then.
Would you want
we
to
can
put it on the
include-
next agenda, Alan, and make it, or?
Could we do,
and
could
just-
we do that for at least a discussion to
Yeah.
set? Because in order to do the regulation, we have to notify the regional planning agency.
Oh, this isn't the regulation, this is just an idea of what we
Yeah,
want to do.
so we'll put up for next meeting, we'll
May
put up for
17th.
discussion,
Put it on
see
that
if you have something
discussion.
drafted.
Okay.
And if I don't, we'll
not-
table it.
That's it.
Yep,
Okay.
And you
All
can't,
right.
you have to recuse yourself. You have to recuse yourself.
yes.
That's right, because I wrote
That's
it.
it.
Okay.
All right.
That, hopefully that's a done deal now.
So does the foundry people come? Do the foundry people, can they come in and give us an update? Like, do they give the council an update? Would they,
Thank you, yes.
That's,
could they
It has
give
nothing to
us?
do with us, though.
I know,
then
but
that's not a minor then that's,
Not a
we have to clarify what a minor modification is.
major modification.
All right, let's move on, 6A.
You just change the plan
Then-
as much as they want.
Can we move to 6A? Zoning enforcement?
I wasn't expecting.
Zoning enforcement. I know that based upon discussions that we're going back to the spreadsheet. I apologize for not having that here. It will be ready for next meeting. We're getting to the spring season where grass is growing, so most of our complaints, unfortunately, are going to be tall grass. I did get something from you that I wanted to talk to you about, so I can. There was a concern about charging station, and that had been approved as a minor mod a while back. And one of the things I want to do is write an EV charging station regulation.
Yep.
Because I just received from, I think it was the state, about ADA spaces required for EV charging stations, so.
Just so we're all on the same page, I drove by several times to that Tesla station on Route 3, and probably 2 times in the same weekend, trash was overflowing from the trash bins, several cars, kids running around the parking lot, and it's turned into a recreation area because, I don't know if you guys know, Teslas can either charge between 20 minutes or 3 hours, depending on your appointment and all this other stuff, and people actually just keep their cars there and walk to establishments, and so it's more than just plugging your car in and sitting there, it's actually turning into like a park.
Yeah, and it's all automated, so there's nobody there.
Yeah, no, you'll do it by an app, you pull in, and that's how you do it. So one of the things I said, Kim, is, and to their defense, later that day, I happened to drive by and someone was actually cleaning the garbage up. It was unprompted. So they are doing something, but I want to make sure everyone understands that this EV station is more than just people charging their cars. It's families hanging out, they're going to the concession stands, they're going to family businesses, and we should think about the future of them in our town because they're going to be more and more.
But who is maintaining that? Who,
I-
you said
that-
garbage can.
It should be
There
the
was
property.
someone there
it should
cleaning the
be
garbage.
property owners.
Okay.
We do agree that there should be trash
Screening,
receptacles
screening,
there.
seats, whatever.
Because of, while your car is charging, what are you doing? Maybe washing the window, doing something else with your car, sitting in your car, eating your lunch. I don't know, but.
Long lunch.
I don't know. So we do agree that there should be trash receptacles there. Whether or not, well, I mean, I don't think we should be encouraging kids playing by putting playground equipment and what have you there.
Well, they just go next door and go get some,
Technically,
Stuff at
I
the
mean,
concession store.
the idea is use the businesses.
lottery tickets.
Some of the charging stations, I know there had been,
Starbucks.
I think there was a request for something in Corporate Ridge, but it was more for the
people who work there.
employees that work in those buildings, so.
Can we put in administrative requirements? Like, you need to stay with.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
Stay with the
Well,
car.
that was one of the things I was saying.
Yeah.
I brought it up to her when that thing was going in, that we should probably have something in our regs that as like a future,
because it's a change of use technically, when you think about it.
on a site.
Yeah, so, but
But parking,
Write
it's
something up,
parking
Alan.
though.
Alan, write something
But
up.
it's parking. So that's semantics, but, well, we can go there.
We put up
It's okay.
parking meters.
Parking meters, yeah.
But don't worry, they're
1
paying.
hour.
They're paying.
okay, that's, all
Wow.
All right.
Minor modifications.
right.
So I think, Kim, you said going forward, you will have at least that Excel spreadsheet that whatever modifications.
Well, yeah,
are-
because from what I heard last, at the, because I ended up watching the meeting, you could tell I really had a lot of time on my hands. I did watch the meeting, and there was a thing about a spreadsheet
Yeah.
for zoning enforcement. Minor mods would go on there from here forward, as well as outdoor dining, because we have 2 outdoor dining establishments that have come in to follow the process. One being Arch 2 at 632 Cromwell Avenue, and one being Carbone's Prime at 838 Cromwell Avenue. So those 2 have actually gone through the process, and
And the
they're
people
already
charging their cars will walk over to the arch too and eat outdoors. That's where that Tesla slot, that's
See?
place.
Okay.
Smart, marketing.
Okay.
All right, 6C, Plan Implementation Committee.
I was not present, but I did watch the meeting.
Yeah, we had a really quick meeting. It was just a reiteration of the past meeting. Kept on focusing on sustainable, Rocky Hill CT or sustainable CT, complete streets, sidewalk plan, our goals as a committee to get in front of the town council, a sidewalk ordinance, fixing the sidewalk ordinance, so this commission can have a little bit more power when it comes to commercial applications and sidewalks, creating a sidewalk fund, creating an affordable housing fund, affordable housing commission. So we hit a bunch of good points, and we actually have the same agenda for the next time, because we had a small quorum for our meeting, but we did realize that it's kind of a good boilerplate agenda, and we'll just add or subtract to it as we go forward. So, believe it or not, these actually have been very productive, and a lot of people are coming out to them, so they're actually been good. Now it's just a matter of getting some stuff done with the Affordable Housing Committee and get that fund going, get that sidewalk fund going, make it all official.
If I may, I did respond to Victor in an email after that meeting, because Dimple wasn't present, so I didn't cite you in any way. I just said Victor was present. I did speak with our town manager, Ray Carpentino, concerning what happened at that meeting, and he would like me to attend one of the May council meetings, to present the affordable housing plan to the council and to talk about a ordinance to create an affordable housing committee. We would like to have at least 2 members of planning and zoning on that committee. Well, 2 members, we can't have 3, that would be a quorum. We would also like to have a process, so it is an apolitical committee, where there's like an application process for people to, we want it to be quick, because we want the committee up and running. So people could become members of that committee. Complete Streets, back in November, we did present the Complete Streets policy, the draft policy from PIC to the council. They did seem to like the policy. However, they were tasked with either accepting it as is, modifying it, or rejecting it, none of which has happened as of yet. So I talked to Ray Carpentino about bringing that back to the town council. We know they're in the budget process, but May is when they wrap up their budget process, so we will resurrect that. We will also tie it into paving programs and sidewalk programs for the town, so when we look at different streets, we can find out what is lacking or what is needed or what could be done to improve the streets for accessibility to all. And public transportation, that type of thing. Sidewalk, with respect to sidewalks, we did also talk about the sidewalk fund. He's aware it's required by state statute. I told him there's a special Fund 40, of which there's 3 line items from planning and zoning tied in with other items from facilities and parks. That's not appropriate. It has to be a separate and distinct fund by state statute. He's aware of that, so that'll be talked about also.
How much money is in our sidewalk fund?
I don't happen to have that number, but.
No one knows?
No, we do have that number, but I don't have it with me. It's in the budget sheets, so we do have that number. I will get that for you. With respect to sidewalks and commercial properties, I know one of the things was to modify the ordinance as far as waivers for commercial properties. My advice to this commission is don't waive the sidewalks for commercial properties. You have the requirement to have sidewalks, So I would say put in the sidewalks. There's very few circumstances for commercial properties where sidewalks should be waived. There was one out on Route 3 where the sidewalk was literally going into a bridge abutment. And what happened there, that portion of the sidewalk was waived, but what the developer did was create a sidewalk on the opposite side of the street and do a crosswalk. So I don't think there was a waiver really, granted.
Is that Town Center West?
No, that
No,
was
it's
the
Brook
storage
Street, Brook
place.
Street and.
There was a self-storage place
Oh,
directly
okay.
opposite Brook Street.
Yeah, because I know in Town Center West, they did propose a crosswalk, and it's in there. But anyway.
But that would be also discussed at the council.
All right. 6D legislation. Anything new? Nothing new.
Well, I do want to talk about, we did get a request from Desegregate Connecticut, who is looking to go and present work, live, play, housing opportunities and ideas to communities. This is something that they're pushing at the legislation, and they would like to come and do a presentation in front of municipal planning and zoning commissions to find out their ideas, their feelings on this. And I did talk briefly with our chairman on that, and I don't know if that's something that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that.
It would be
they
a
want to
brief presentation.
But I think what I was thinking is this would be a good way of presenting our ideas, concerns, whatever we may have
Can they bring
related
snacks?
to, affordable housing.
Food.
So,
That's a good.
Yeah, we would make it fairly brief.
Yep.
I'd
Good
reach
idea.
out to them and say, maybe 15 minutes tops. Put it on the agenda.
all right. Communication, I think we addressed that, the letter. We don't have any bills. Adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
All in favor?
Second.
Second was Ron, right?
Yeah, sure. Yep.
All right.